Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the boy in the team in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 41, Every rising star plummets to the ground. The uprooted trees left the place to settling clouds of dust. Atop a branch, hidden by a bunch of leaves, Shinka watched while holding Naruko up. He ground his teeth as his eyes gazed on the torn battlefield. A piece of blue soon followed by a strip of black got his attention. Sasuke was down for the count, but apparently, Orochimaru had left. He was still alive, even as he descended to reach the ground level. He didn't doubt for an instant that he'd die if the Sunin was still there. Thankfully, while Sasuke looked as if he had gone through a meat grinder, he was still breathing. The boy was shuddering and trembling, his teeth chattering as if he had a high fever. Orochimaru had probably poisoned him, or something similar to that. Looking around the torn meadow, Shinka clicked his tongue in dissatisfaction. There wasn't a safe place to hide around there. He really had no choice but to grip on Sasuke with his other arm and then start carrying both of his teammates. He took 3 steps, before his breathing grew ragged. No, he wouldn't be going far by carrying them at the same time. Still, he couldn't abandon one and come back for him later. A few steps further and he dropped down to one knee near a fallen tree trunk. Shinka laid them both against the tree's bark, before quickly scampering for the tree's branches. He cut them off, using the leaves to form a sort of sheet. A few minutes later, and he admired his work. His hands filled with splinters, he now had pointy branches hidden by a thick sheet of leaves. Hoisting Naruko and Sasuke again, he carried them atop the fallen trunk, before hiding their bodies with the natural vegetation of the upper side of the tree. In that way, enemy shinobi would think of the fake camp as the place where he had camp. Misdirection was the key. He knew he just had to wait for Naruko or Sasuke to wake up to be out of danger. The sound of rushing water reached his ears as he drew small breaths. Water meant he could, well, wash his hands of the blood. He flinched as he remembered the tigers. He just had to be quick about it. He was exhausted as he reached the river. The adrenaline wearing off, the fear dissipating, he stumbled, and fell face first in the river. A small part of him whispered that drinking river water without boiling it first was not healthy, but the thirsty side of him didn't care. If he had to die of something, he'd certainly not die of diarrhea. His metal flask filled, he had carried it with him this time around. Shinka returned to camp. Sasuke still shuddered, grounding his teeth in pain, while Naruko simply appeared out like a light, unconscious and unmoving if not for a light up and down movement of her chest. Instinctively, a hand went to Sasuke's forehead and swiftly Shinka pulled it away while waving it in the air. It wasn't just a fever, it felt like somebody had lit a fire on the Uchiha's head. I swear, Shinka muttered, if Kakashi can see the future. He broke the towel he had carried from home in half with a kunao, and then proceeded to break it in more small pieces. Wetting them, he placed one in Sasuke's mouth to keep him hydrated and one on his forehead. Playing nurse, Shinka grumbled. Better than being dead, he shook his head. He actually dripped some water on Naruko, trying to get a reaction out of the girl. It didn't work. He suspected that either she was a heavy sleeper, or that Orochimaru was responsible for her state too. He clenched his fists as he walked away from the hiding spot of his 2 teammates. Misdirection couldn't work without a bait, and he had to be the bait. He didn't know the cage bunshin technique like Naruko did, so he had to lay his own life on the line. His heart drummed as he placed himself, carefully hidden by the leaves cloak, near the fake camp. Shinka gripped on his Kirigaku or kunao, and then, he waited. His stomach grumbled as the sun began to lower itself, but he didn't move. He could feel his muscles protest, his body whine about the position and his hand tremble from the firm hold he had on the handle of the kunao. There weren't any visible enemies yet, but he couldn't count on the chance of everyone spending the night sleeping. Probably, many teams would start attacking at night. He blearily closed his eyes. If he prepared a fire near the fake camp. It was getting somewhat cold. He shuddered. He carefully crept out of his hiding spot, moving quickly to the tree on the other side of the torn battlefield. From there, he began to climb upwards. He didn't have much of a choice. He couldn't go too far from his team to hunt, and he doubted he'd ever catch a rabbit to begin with. The problem was the giant trees held nothing of comestible on them. He gripped at one of the explosive tags. With the light dying, he jumped on the next branch and the one soon after. Anyone could fish with explosives. He didn't have a choice. He'd throw the tag, wait for the explosion, and then quickly grab whatever fish rose to the surface. Shinku tied the tag to a branch, no need to waste a kunao, and then he flung it at the river's waters. The explosion rocked the air, as the boy jumped down and quickly walked on water, piercing with the kiragaku or kunao whatever fish rose to the surface. 2 fishes filled with teeth later, and Shinku was back to camp. Lighting a fire with matches was easy. He sighed as he watched the fish cook on the low flames, hidden beneath a mound of dirt. He'd let the fish char, better to eat it burnt than eat it raw. He clenched his knees with his hands, squirming from the nervousness running through his body. What if someone investigated the noise? What if someone found him? His questions went thankfully unanswered, as nobody came even as he force-fed fish poultice to his teammates. Really, he grumbled to a whimpering Suzuki. He could swear the boy was muttering something about Itachi every now and then. I'll have to change the cloth, he sighed as he took a sip of water, before wetting the pieces of cloth once more. Nariko was still sleeping, but feeding her proved surprisingly easily. She even chewed on her own accord. She had the guts to frown and make a blia sound to boot. Don't blia me, Shinku muttered. What were you expecting? I'm without salt to begin with. He covered them both with his own bed covers. He had no idea where the two had their own storage seals, and he didn't know what would happen if he tried to use them. He didn't want to attract attention by summoning forth their entire stored armory or stuff like that. He returned to his spot, shuddering under the leaves cover. It was going to be a long night. Against all odds, he did wake up in the middle of the night. Thankfully, he did. A kunao sliced the air. A set of senbon needles pierced his sides as he dashed out of his cover, while a strange air pressure pulled apart the fake camp, splintering shards of woods and leaves everywhere. He ground his teeth as he stumbled on the ground, a kunao nicking his shoulder as a kick slammed into his sides. His entire body fell through the air and slammed against the tree nearby, cutting away the air from his lungs as he wheezed out a painful cough. 3 ninja from Otagakure stood in the clearing, their musical notes headbands clearly visible. This was probably what it felt to be on the receiving end of an ambush. It sucked. If Shinku had to state his opinion about it, it clearly sucked to be the one ambushed. His reinforced vest, however, had saved his guts. The senbon needles hadn't pierced through the reinforced plates, and the kick had been probably as painful to the attacker as it had been to his ribs. Well, one of the 3, a heavily bandaged man with a strange neck fur, spoke then. You're in the team with the Uchiha, right? Shinku coughed, falling down on one knee while holding his sides. He never learned how to throw needles, but he suspected they had coated them in poison to begin with. What if I am? Shinku hissed back. We want to see how strong he is. Call him out, the bandaged man remarked. Or maybe he's gone off picking on weaker teams with his other teammate. The man inclined his head to the side. Did they leave you behind as they went hunting? What if they did? An airwave sliced through his chest, making him scream as blood appeared on his left and right arm diagonally. The attack had probably meant to slice him also in the chest, but the jacket had absorbed much of the blow, but the reinforced plates below were now quite visible, as the cloth had come loose. OHI. We're the one making questions. The other man said heatedly, trash like you should shut the fuck up and answer. Fuck off, Shinku hissed, spitting blood on the ground as he wobbly stood back up. Senbon needles pierced his neck. His eyes widened in shock, as he gurgled, gripping on the needles and hastily pulling them out, blood pouring out copiously from the wounds. I didn't hit any veins or important bits, the kunoichi replied. But we have all night to have fun with you, unless you tell us what we want to know. Shinku chuckled, even as blood dripped down on his hands and arms, reaching for his elbows and vest. You'll have to do better, he giggled. This is nothing. He took a step forward, but his vision began to spin to the point where he simply fell forward, coughing and wheezing stronger than before. You won't be saying the same bullshit bravado once the poison runs its course, the kunoichi said plainly. You can avoid a long agony if you simply tell us where the Uchiha is. It isn't difficult. Is he around here? Is he out hunting? Do you have a passphrase set up? Shinku closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. His head felt light. Maybe if he didn't answer, they'd think him dead. He stopped breathing. OHI, another airwave slammed him back against the tree, but this time he didn't as much as wince, letting the blow carry him again on the ground. Hey. Kin. Did you check the dosage? I think we killed the trash. I checked it. It's not my fault. You probably attacked him too hard. The kunoichi replied. Wait, the voice of the bandaged man said. He could be faking it. Shinku mentally hissed. His entire body hurt. He probably had broken his right arm against the tree with the second blow, and he had no idea on what to do. He was pretty much screwed if they didn't catch the bait. He needed another plan. He needed something that would work. Maybe he could carpet bomb them with whatever explosive tags he still had. Cut him to bits, Zaku, the voice of the bandaged man remarked. Leave a message to his teammates. Konoha ninjas are so sentimental these days, they'll probably come to us and save us the time. All right Dosuo, Zaku muttered. In that instant, Shinku rolled to the side and dashed. He barely took 2 steps in the opposite direction that a volley of senbon needles struck his back, ricocheting off his vest in a kunao, then plunged deeply near his spine. The plate absorbed the brunt of the impact, but the tip still pierced through a good inch. He coughed out blood, as he turned his head to see the bandaged man holding a triumphant smile on his face. You really thought us so stupid? Shinku chuckled, before opening the Ika. Dosa watched as a book filled with explosive tag opened right in front of him. He pulled back, leaving the kunao deep into the wound and shielding himself from the incoming explosion, that didn't come. We run, from what we fear, Shinku mumbled, taking a deep breath. Let's call everyone. OHI, Shinku muttered, you done? No, because, well, he mumbled, grabbing a hold of all the tags inside the book. This is, going boom. Shinku chuckled. Poison got to his head, Dosa stated plainly. We should wait for him to bleed out. Why can't I cut him to bits? Zaku remarked. Shinku fell on the ground, his entire body trembling. Don't waste chakra, Dosa replied. The way I got him, it's a miracle he's still standing. Shinku sniffled. It was very cold. The ground was hard. The rocks were hurting the sides of his face. He couldn't hear much, only the thumping of something in his chest. He had tears in the corner of his eyes. There wasn't a reset button, was there? He should have prepared a kawarimi, filled it with explosive tags and then enacted a replacement. He hadn't. Well, he had done his job, right? Kakashi wasn't going to kill him. Tears began to fall down his cheeks, mixing with the blood that poured from his neck on the ground in a puddle of salty water and crimson liquid. So, we're dying here? His reflection muttered in the puddle, which he wasn't even seeing but simply imagined. We're dying in the forest of death, right? He didn't answer. We're dying here, right? He didn't answer. Answer me. His other voice roared. Do we die here? He trembled. What could he do? You can start by standing up, his other voice stated plainly. It hurt everywhere. How could he stand? Every single limb of his felt heavy. How could he walk? You don't ask how, his other self said. You stand. I'm telling you to stand. They would simply attack him again. They would simply strike him down again. Then, we stand again. They'd kill him. Then, we just defy death. That's impossible. We won't know until we try, his other voice whispered, the voice was now faint. Stand now, or die. Wake the fuck up Shinku Harano. I'm ordering you to wake the fuck up. He blearily opened his eyes to the cerulean ones of Nariko, whose face was far more demonic than he had ever seen her have. She was breathing heavily, her entire body awash with blue chakra, but it made little difference. Nariko gasped for air, holding a firm grip on his shoulders. He was seeing stars because of the pressure on his right one, but he refrained from saying that. Here. Eat. You stupid imbecile. Naruko literally forced him to swallow some sort of bitter sphere, followed by another and yet one more. He coughed and spluttered, before he found himself pushed down on the ground. "Now you stay here," Naruko remarked coldly, cracking her knuckles. "I'm gonna go break some bones." With a feral growl, she turned and gazed at the trio from Otagakure. "Well? Why did you fuckers had all to gank up on Shin-chan? You think I'm going to let this pass, You goddamn better be ready to get your arseholes plowed, because by the time I'll be done with you not even your mother will recognize your ugly face." He was in the way, Dosu stated plainly. "We wanted to challenge the Uchiha." I don't give a damn," Naruko cracked her neck. "You mess with one my friends, you mess with family. You mess with family, and you're pleading to get in a world of hurt." Naruko charged ahead. Dosu had expected the hierarchy of the Kyuubi to be strong. He had even planned a contingency where Zuko would keep her at bay while Kin Genjutsu ed her and he delivered a few blows to the flanks. It simply meant nothing. The girl literally tore through Zuko's airwaves as if they were but a gentle breeze, slamming her right fist straight through Zuko's stomach and rupturing through his flesh all the way to the other side. Zuko coughed out a river of blood as Kin flanked them both to fling her senbon needles. The needles did pierce the girl, but then they simply dropped on the ground as the wounds closed. Dropping Zuko's bleeding body like a now useless bag, the girl twisted in midair before slamming her foot down mere inches away from Kin's retreating head. The ground cracked. Dosu had no doubts. If he didn't get an exchange token soon, he charged to where the downed boy was. If he could reach him. Dub, a giant purple chakra hand gripped him in less than an instant. "What's going on?" Sasuke Uchiha grumbled, hissing from the pain in his shoulder. He barely recalled the fight, better to call it trashing with the traitorous Sunin, but he knew that whatever the man had done wasn't anything good. "Please." Dosu yelled then as he felt his air coming less, "We're sorry. We'll give you our scroll if." Sasuke looked with his manjikyu from Dosu to Naruko's incensed form, and then to Shinko's body lying on the ground in a puddle of blood. His eyes narrowed. The Susanoo strengthened its grip. Dosu's ribcage snapped into a pulp as the man's entire body turned to mush in the chakra construct's hands. "Dosu!" Kin yelled, watching the scene horrified, before Naruko's upcoming hand gripped her by the left arm. With a quick thrust, Naruko pushed the Otagakure kunoichi on the ground and then tore off her limb. Letting go of the broken arm, Naruko grabbed the back of the head of the woman and pulled it upwards, letting her arm circle beneath it until with a quick jab, the neck broke, and the kunoichi died with her mouth morphed in a scream for mercy. Breathing heavily, Naruko wobbled away from the corpse and back towards the downed form of Shinku. "Ohi," she mumbled. "I said to stay the hell awake," she sniffled. "Dub," Sasuke closed his eyes, letting go of the pulp that was the Otagakure's shinobi. "Is he?" Shin-chan's breathing, Naruko shot back, giving him a sour look. "And his cooking sucks. Why did you have to add that?" Sasuke grumbled, as he stepped forward. Without saying another word, he placed both hands on Naruko's trembling shoulders. "It's all right, you know. What if he doesn't wake up?" "Knowing him, he'll be up and about in no time," Sasuke replied. "Now, let's get out of here before someone else comes snooping around." Naruko chuckled. "If they come, I'll just show them what happens when you mess with my team, Tabia." She raised her right hand, completely drenched in blood just like her left one, and frowned. "There's so much blood in a human body." "Yes," Sasuke replied dryly. His eyes looked to the three bodies on the ground. "I'll check for their scrolls." "Yeah, you do that," Naruko hummed, before wincing at the torn look of Shinko's outfit. "Did he go through the ringer or something?" "Ohi, what if they poisoned him?" "You gave him a soldier pill already." "Course I did. I'm not stupid," Naruko retorted hotly. "My mom nearly gave me an entire chemist shop in pills and bandages, but..." She bit her lips. "Again, I have no idea how to set a broken bone." "He broke one of his bones again." Sasuke asked in disbelief, "You think nature hates him or something?" Triumphantly, Sasuke grabbed from the poultice remains of Dosu an earth scroll. "We've got the scroll. You think it's safe to move him?" Naruko asked warily. "I mean, he's messed up a lot and I don't know about moving him." I had free time in my hands, Sasuke remarked dryly. Memorizing a few medical textbooks was easy. Knowing the levels of stupid in the team, someone had to be ready to patch up the wounds. Naruko gave Sasuke a bleary look. You're lucky I don't hit ladies. Sasuke returned a sour look to Naruko. You're lucky I don't hit retards. They both chuckled, bitterly. I feel like shit, Naruko mumbled, stopping herself from passing her hands on her hair. You think it's going to wash away? The blood? Probably. The stupid? Never. Are you done with the stupid jokes? Mangekyo Sharinon is still showing me the deaths in repeat, I need to distract myself, Sasuke muttered. Frankly, this is a curse. I have no idea why anyone would want these eyes, he shuddered. Duh, maybe for the giant purple sex doll you pop out from your ass in the blink of an eye. Hey, hearing the elders, I can also throw fire from my eyes that burns as hot as the sun for 7 days and 7 nights, Sasuke remarked. Good, we'll cook sausages with that, Naruko replied sourly. Now, if you're done whining about your Yuchan powers, tell me what we have to do to set Shinchan's arm. First, we need a splint. Shinku grumbled. He felt his cheek poked. He grumbled a bit more. OHI, he blinked, blearily opening his eyes. It's boring in here, his other self remarked dryly. We, alive. Yep, Inner nodded, at least, unless in death we're both tied to this freakish hallucination plane, then yes, we're both fine. Around them was nothing but a deep wasteland tinted purple, with the bright green scales of a giant snake slithering away with a bear in his jaws. Again with that. He grumbled. You know, Inner said plainly, maybe that was a premonition of things to come? You know, we're the bear and Orochimaru the snake, and he eats us so we die and... As if stuff like seeing the future exists, Shinku mumbled, gripping on the wasteland's purple sand. Why is it sticky? Sand mixed with blood, Inner shrugged. I thought it would be a nice decorative element. You couldn't have prepared a fluffy bedroom filled with bright and cheerful stuff, right? What? Why would I ever do something like that? Inner crossed his eyes in shock. I'm not some pansy whose strong point is baking. Thanks, he muttered. For, you know, everything. No need to be so sentimental, Inner rolled his eyes. We could have been awesome. You could have stood up and, making one giant roar of anger, charged ahead against the enemies and then unlocked your secret technique of ultra speed to deal with them in slow motion. Shinku looked blearily at Inner. Yanking my chain. You barely have a nickel, there's no chain to yank, Inner smiled as he winked. But guess who's awesome? I am. The awesome Inner solves the situation once more. You want an applause? Don't need one, Inner shrugged. The landscape around him trembled a bit, as the sky began to fall into pieces. Well, Inner said, time to wake up. Shinchan. OHI, Sasuke. Shinchan's waking up. Shinku hissed in pain as he felt his right side burn. He opened his eyes weakly, taking in the facts. He had Naruko's blonde locks practically drowning him in a sea of golden. It wasn't as poetic as it seemed, because he literally was suffocating. Gah, he spluttered out a few strands of hair. Gah. He muttered. You all right, Shinku? Sasuke asked from behind him. The Uchiha was probably acting as a rear guard. Shinku's throat was parched, but he did manage a weak yeah out of his mouth. He says he's fine and that he can't wait for some deep tender love from his Yuke tonight. Naruko yelled back. I'll ignore everything other than the he's fine, dope, Sasuke clicked his tongue. We're nearly at the tower anyway. The Oto team had the scroll we needed, then, as an afterthought, he added, how did you get a heaven scroll by yourself anyway? Ah. Shinku mumbled, ambush. Shinchan says he awesomely ambushed a team while carrying us to safety. There were heaps of explosions and sunglasses too. Dub, why don't you shut up for once? Sasuke remarked. There it is. The Uchiha said suddenly, the tower. Shinku closed his eyes and ground his teeth harder as he suddenly felt the pull of gravity push him down. Naruko's muscles counteracted the pull, and he hissed in pain with tears in the corner of his eyes at the whiplash. He soon found himself hoisted by both his teammates, his arms circling around their necks as they carried him inside. "OHI! We need a medic in here!" Naruko yelled aloud to the empty hall. "Really? Shin-chan's wounded and I don't trust Yuki-chan's techniques at all. We need to open the scrolls now, idiot." Sasuke rolled his eyes. The earth and heaven scroll quickly rolled open on the ground, where they both popped in a cloud of smoke to reveal. "Yojao Izuki. You did." Yojao blinked at the amount of blood covering her genin. "Infirmary, all of you, now. Is anyone seriously wounded?" "Shin-chan," Naruko said plainly, as if it was obvious. "Me and Yuki-chan are fine." "Sasuke and I," Sasuke corrected. "We did it." Shinku mumbled with his eyes half open and half closed. "Yes, and all in just 2 days. I'm sure your parents will be proud of you, but now move it." Yojao quickly gripped onto Shinku's shoulder. "Let's not waste time. Infections don't wait." The infirmary of the tower was a clean and neat place that smelled of alcohol. Yojao gently laid Shinku on a nearby bed, and then gave a curt nod to the medic assigned, whose hands glowed green as he began working on patching the wounds. Sasuke's eyes spun gently with the Mangekyo, as he took in the movements and the technique. Just because the Sharingan was an instrument of murder, it didn't mean that was its only benefit. Naruko fidgeted like a squirrel on caffeine, her ears perking up and down every few seconds. The door slid open with a bang. "My baby!" Kushina flung herself to hug Naruko, making the girl gawk and cough, before spluttering out a few strands of her mother's hair. "Mom!" Naruko whined for a moment, before returning the hug and burying her face in her mother's neck. Mikoto Uchiha entered gracefully next, followed by the Yondaime and Kakashi, albeit the silver-haired Jounin made sure to have his sensei between him and the woman. "Sasuke?" Mikoto asked, seeing her son intent on watching his teammate healing. "Is everything all right, dear?" Sasuke closed his eyes, opening them back up to their normal dark appearance. "Yeah." Mikoto just hugged him, much to Sasuke's bewildered expression. "Hello there, Kakashi," I smiled, gazing at Shinku. "You done with your half-asleep ruse? Do I get a free gut punch if I do?" Shinku replied, gazing up weakly at his sensei. "Being ambushed sucks." Kakashi chuckled. "That's why you should do the ambushing, and not vice versa." Shinku exhaled in relief. "You did well, kid," Kakashi said with his serious voice. "You did very well." Shinku smiled, a bright beaming smile. "Thanks. You read the porn?" "It was explosive," Shinku chuckled. "You didn't blow too early, right?" Kakashi replied with a snicker. "I'm not a short fuse," Shinku remarked. All right, Naruko suddenly said. "Kakashi and you stop corrupting Shin-chan right now." "Really?" The girl pouted. "You never challenge me to dirty joke contests. It's unfair." Sasuke closed his eyes, shaking his head in disbelief. "I knew it would be a stupid reason. I knew it." "Well, you all did well anyway," Minato said. "Now rest up. Since you arrived early, you'll probably be bored out of your wits, but there's nothing we can do about it. In 3 days, the second task will be done and hopefully we'll see the final competitors in the tournament the next month." "Oh, right," Naruko blinked. "Hey Dad? You know we were attacked in the forest, right?" "Well, it was part of the exam, but I had all the trust." "No, I mean, you know who attacked us, right?" "The cameras were turned off to avoid accusations of favoritism within the forest," Minato replied, his face slowly becoming a frown. "Why?" "Oh, nothing," Naruko shrugged, a small smile gracing her lips. "There was just, a fucking S-rank ninja." The girl yelled aloud, making Minato eep lightly. When Naruko channeled the angry Kushina, she was as fearsome as her mother. "What?" Mikoto muttered in disbelief. "Orochimaru. Orochimaru." Naruko spelled it out, really. "That damn snake freak hits like a train. Weren't there meant to be Umbu patrolling the forest? Were they all taking naps or something? Was there an orgy going on in the bushes?" "Naruko. Language!" Minato exclaimed. "Really? Jiraiya-sensei told me he was careful about what words he said in front of you. Course he did, but the geisha were quite looser just like the sailors, Naruko replied with a snappish tone, and... Wait, Jiraiya-sensei brought you into the whorehouses? Minato asked, his voice devoid of mirth. Duh. Naruko rolled her eyes, as if it was obvious. Minato smiled. I'll have a chat with him later. Now, what did Orochimaru do to you all? Oh, Naruko shrugged. He just hit me really hard. Sasuke grumbled, before pulling down his shirt to show a mark on the side of his neck, near the shoulder. The bastard bit me. Naruko blinked. She opened her mouth, about to say something concerning pedophiles and, having an older seme, when the serious look on her father's face stilled her. It was an extremely serious expression. That. Minato muttered, that might be a problem. To those words, silence fell in the infirmary. Chapter 42, No chocolate means ultra luck. Shinku mainly slept. Chakra healing was wonderful, but it had its limits. He wasn't bored for long, because when he opened his eyes again, he opened them to bright green mint hair resting on the side of his bed peacefully snoring away. He chuckled lightly at the scene. Fu was drooling all over the bed sheets, snoring softly. And this makes it the second time, Shinku mumbled. Fu's ears twitched as she stirred, moaning softly before popping an eye open and then the other. Blearily rubbing them, she made a small groaning sound as she fully woke up. A few seconds later, and she turned red. Hey, they both stammered out at the same time. So, Fu fidgeted, you passed the second exam. It was a team effort, Shinku muttered. Fu remained quiet. Shinku didn't say a word. I'm sorry, Fu blurted out, I was busy, she explained. If I had seen what was going on, I'd have intervened. It's not a problem, Shinku smiled awkwardly. Even Naruko and Sasuke were knocked out by Orochimaru. Fu lowered her gaze. But I had to patrol with the other Umbu. I even knew where you were but, well, they assigned me elsewhere, she pouted. It was to avoid favoritism. Shinku's eyes half closed, let me guess, they assigned someone to us who looked elsewhere. Fu nodded awkwardly. The Hokage is really angry about it too, I heard him yelling for a good half an hour, she then brought her face nearer to whisper, I think he's still yelling even now. He seems like the quiet type, Shinku said, I suppose he has some lungs, right? Fu giggled. Yeah. She looked to him with a small smile, before adding, what happened after that bad Mina came by? Shinku's eyes looked up to the ceiling. Nothing much. Nothing much doesn't account for an extra heaven scroll, this voice was male, and Shinku instinctively stiffened like a plank of wood. And I do have a set of healthy lungs, I admit, the Hokage added with a small chuckle. So, is this going to become a habit? I mean, you saving my daughter? Because I warn you, I am terribly fast with my kunao. Shinku looked from the Hokage to Fu, and then back with a perplexed expression. Ops, Minato nervously chuckled. I can't read the mood to save myself, right? Fu turned crimson, and began to fidget. A moment of silence passed. A moment of absolute, complete, and utter silence went by with all three sides of the conversation suffering through their respective embarrassment. Well. Minato hummed to break the silence. I need to know what happened during the time between Orochimaru's attack and the moment your teammates both woke up, he stated. Also, anything of importance you might have noticed. Was he debriefing with the Hokage present in the room? He apparently was. When Orochimaru attacked, he was sort of like a human and a snake, like, his lower half was that of a snake and he punched Naruko before hitting with his tail Sasuke. I backtracked to grab Naruko who Orochimaru had pushed backwards, and an AIM team arrived on the scene. I disposed of them, and acquired their heaven scroll. Proceeded to Sasuke's last known location, and Orochimaru was already gone. I made camp, Shinku said, taking a moment to catch his breath, and then I hid both Sasuke and Naruko while I kept guard. Calm down, kid, nobody's on your case, Minato said, holding up a small and soft smile. So an AIM team tried to stop you, and you disposed of them. I'm used to killing AIM shinobi by now, Shinku replied with a hard glint in his eyes. while carrying Naruko. Shinku blinked. Yes. There was this tree. It had fallen after the impact of Naruko's body against it, so it made some sort of natural hidey hole. One of the AIM shinobi went in to investigate. I gutted him. Grabbed Naruko, fake called for help, ran up a tree, left Naruko there, flung an explosive tag at the second genin, and when the third came back out I jumped down and sliced his neck. He inclined his head to the side, perplexed. I'm good at slicing necks with ninja wire. Wonderful, Minato smiled, making a small nervous chuckle. Then the sound team ambushed you, and from what Naruko told me you were in a pretty bad shape by the time she and Sasuke finally woke up. Shinku awkwardly nodded. They wanted to fight against Sasuke, but, well, I refused to tell them where my teammates were because I hid them. And why didn't you hide with them too? I don't trust my hiding skills that much, Shinku chuckled. I mean, I had planned a little trap with a fake camp and all, but the sound team just saw through it with ease, so. You left yourself out as bait? Minato asked with his voice quiet and his eyes softly looking at him with a sort of, was it pity? Why did the man pity him? Shinku blinked. Of course, if they saw me, they wouldn't look further, right? I even made a fire to cook dinner, didn't have any salt though, so the fish tasted like crap, sorry. He bit his tongue at the crap. Really, saying crap in front of the Hokage. By the Medicnin report, you're lucky to even be alive. One of their attacks nearly nicked your spine. Fu's grip on his hand strengthened, making him gaze towards the girl for just a moment, and there were traces of poison through your bloodstream, what little blood you still had. Minato passed a hand through his blonde hair. Had it been an official mission, I'd be assigning you a medal for this, you know. But. No, listen here, kid. You went beyond the call of duty to protect your teammates, placing your very life at risk and refusing to cooperate with an enemy team. That's something I don't want you to misunderstand, ever. These exams are a mean to simulate war, that's their important characteristic no matter the moniker of exams they are given. Even in these circumstances, a lesser shinobi might have run away, he might have ignored his teammates to save his own life. Orochimaru is an S-rank shinobi with a run-on-site order. You didn't, and for that you have my gratitude, both as a father and as the Hokage. It's good to see the youth of Konoha burn brightly with the will of fire. He smiled then, well, I can't wait to see you in the third part of the Chunin exams. I'll leave you and your girlfriend alone now, just, don't do anything written on any ika until you're both older, understood? They both spluttered, turning twin shades of red as Minato laughed and left. Shinku closed his eyes for a moment, before realizing Fu's grip on his hand hadn't come less. She feebly mumbled, "I wouldn't." She murmured something else unintelligible. Shinku's eyes opened to stare in surprise at Fu, who looked downwards while squirming on her seat. "I wouldn't mind being girlfriend." She eeped then, the red on her face turning a new level of scarlet. Shinku gazed at her for a moment more, and then awkwardly smiled. "I'll be in your care, then." Fu looked at him, wide-eyed. She proceeded to tackle him with a startled cry, making him gasp in surprise. Yes. The door of the infirmary opened in that split second, as Sasuke stepped in with sweat rolling down his brow. No. I missed it. Sasuke growled, raising his hands in the air. I missed it. Don't worry, Naruko replied, appearing from a spot on the ceiling. I've got the pictures. Holding onto a camera, the blonde swiftly descended from her hiding place and then moved closer to Sasuke. Look. Aren't they cute together? Like, really. There were tears of joy in Naruko's eyes. I'm so proud of you, Shin-chan. They're both red. Sasuke grumbled. You could have waited or chickened out. Really? He crossed his arms over his chest. I didn't want to watch the reaction from a camera. And, Naruko. There's your thumb over the screen. Ops, my bad, teehee, Naruko replied awkwardly. Sawai. Don't destroy the language, dope. Sasuke snapped. Gah. How could you? You know I'm forever doomed to never find true romance, with my fangirls hanging around like parasites. I wanted to assist, just once, to a blossoming pure love between two socially awkward persons. For some reason, that pisses me off, Shinku mumbled. Fu was apparently out cold, steam emerging from her ears. "OHI! Don't you be mean to Shin-chan and Fu-chan now!" Nariko exclaimed, huffing. "He saved your guts and mine. Did you have to pull the socially stunted card?" Yeah, Sasuke rolled his eyes. "Sorry. The tattoo hurts like hell. Kakashi's isn't able to do something without making you suffer to save his life." "That's Kakashi nii alright," Nariko rolled her eyes. Shinku closed his eyes with a smile on his lips. He was alive. The Hokage had praised him. He had a girlfriend. Things were turning out great. He really should have let go of the chocolate sooner. Fu couldn't remain longer, she still had to patrol, after all, and so Shinku found himself simply walking from the infirmary to the bunks assigned to the shinobi who had completed the task earlier. Apparently, they weren't the only team to already complete the test, but they were the only ones assigned to that side of the tower to avoid people slicing each other's throat, probably. At the end of the 5th day, there were 7 teams lined up neatly. The Suna team, holding a red-haired boy with dark circles around his eyes and a gourd on his back, a woman with a giant fan and a strange pajama-wearing guy with purple mascara on his face. Team 10, with the Yamanaka girl and her 2 sidekicks. Team 8 with the Hyuga girl Nariko hated, the Inyazuka that Sasuke despised, and Shino who apparently gave him a curt nod and a thumb up. Shinku had to blink for a moment before realizing what the other boy meant with that, before widening his eyes in surprise. How could the Abarame know? Shino just tapped his nose at his perplexed gaze and Shinku nodded back, suddenly understanding, nothing, but probably tied to pheromones or stuff like that. Nariko cut their silent conversation short by giving him a light menacing growl that sort of said, "Don't gaze in that direction or I'll slap you with a rolled newspaper." There was also Team Guy, with Niji giving a stiff snort directed towards the other Hyuga, rather than at him. Did everyone hate that girl? What was she, some sort of punching bag? There was also a team from Konoha with 3 elder genin, who seemed to like the purple color for some reason. Except for their team, just one more had passed the Kirigakuer one. "If Zabuza-sama asks," one of them whispered to the others, "we want to teach him a lesson in public, alright." The other 2 quickly nodded. "Now if we don't pass, we all make a run for Kiri as fast as we can." The other 2 nodded faster. "Well," the yondaime spoke, clapping his hands, gathering everyone's attention. Around the man were all the Jounin sensei of the respective teams, meaning that Zabuza was delivering the evil eye to Shinku. "Congratulations on passing the 2nd exam." Shinku awkwardly smiled towards Zabuza. Zabuza grumbled. He wanted the Umbu to kill his team, not to bring it in one piece to the finals. Was it that difficult to understand? He ignored the droned-out words of the yondaime. The blonde fop always talked a lot about the will of fire, but the Bloody Mist's will was way better and concentrated on getting his message across. If the boy killed his team, he'd even invite him for a sake drink later that day. He was sure they'd have a lot of bloody stories to tell each other, and he did need someone to drink with. Drinking alone was simply too risky in a foreign village. "I think Zabuza's out for your blood, Shin-chan," Nariko mumbled. "He's been staring in our direction pretty hard. Did you answer his burning with love letters?" Shinku gave a sour look towards Nariko. Sorry. Nariko giggled softly. "The strength of the country," Minato's voice came then stronger, "is the strength of the village. The strength of the village is the strength of the shinobi. And a shinobi's true strength is born only through life-risking battles." With those words said, Shinku's glare snapped harder than ever, towards Kakashi. And Kakashi, the despicable bastard, the horrendous pile of utter, had the galls to nod to those words, and his only eye, of course, settled on Shinku. If anyone wishes to forfeit their exams now, this would be the moment. As soon as Minato said that, nobody raised his arm. The 21 genin moved with their respective Jounin sensei up in the stands, as the giant board soon began to ring through the names. The first match soon began. Sasuke Uchiha versus Akadu Yorawi. It lasted, predictably, the time for Sasuke to glance at the sunglass-wearing purple-dressed man before flicking him on the other side of the arena with a simply summoned Susanoo arm. Akito twitched on the ground, not really doing anything more. Overkill, Naruko grumbled. That's like, overkill totally. Shinku chuckled nervously. It was anticlimactic, but who could fault Sasuke from ending the match early? With a long loud yawning, the Uchiha stretched and then returned up to the stalls. Now beat this, bimbo. Oh. You're so on. Come on dad, make the board move faster. Minato chuckled nervously, even as Gekko Hayate sighed and gave his trademark cough. Sumio Sakata faced off against Abarame Shino. Shinku's skin simply began to itch, not only because Shino called forth a storm of crawling bugs out of his sleeves, but also because his enemy made a single hand seal before disappearing in a thick cloud of fog. The insects ate the cloud as if it were cotton candy, with Shino merely pushing his sunglasses back up the ridge of his nose. Kikaichu eat chakra. Thank you for giving them a refreshing drink. You have lost. Why do I say this? Because you can't hide from my Kikaichu's senses. True to his words, Sumio Sakata surrendered before ending up covered in bugs. Tsurugi Misumi went up against Kankuro, who was apparently the pajama-wearing guy with the mascara. Shinku shuddered. On one side, Misumi made him feel uncomfortable with just the amount of bending he could do, and on the other the mascara guy had a very, very scary puppet. Wasn't there anyone normal like him in the middle of these monsters? He was still shuddering when Naruko tapped him on the shoulder and he raised an eyebrow. What? Shin-chan. It's your turn. Naruko said, chuckling. Come on, enough scaredy cat show. Shinku swallowed and then gazed at the electronic board for the first time. Of course, he had been stupid to forget about it. He was participating too. He walked his way down hesitantly, before stepping in front of his opponent. Ino Yamanaka looked at him while huffing in displeasure. So. Finally. Didn't they tell you that making a lady wait is rude, dead last? Ohi Ino bitch. Shut the hell up. Go Shin-chan. Kick her ass all the way to the compost heap. Naruko yelled from the stands. Ino huffed, gripping a kunao in her right hand. As if the dead last could do anything. Shinku felt strange. He didn't care about being insulted concerning his dead last status. He didn't care about fighting a girl rather than a boy, but there was something missing. He couldn't, well, yes, he could fight but it was as if something was missing from the fight. Something important, that should have been there. The moment the instructor gave the start, Ino charged ahead. There wasn't. Shinku felt the fist hit him hard in the stomach as he instinctively pulled his body back, but it was like being in water. He didn't feel the need to guard. He didn't feel the desire to kill. This was playing. It wasn't real. Oh, Kakashi mumbled from his spot, that might be a problem. Hey Shin-chan. Wake up. You've got to fight on. Come on. It's Ino. Don't be a gentleman and hit that damn bitch. Sasuke growled, before slamming a fist on Naruko's head. Dope, that's not the problem. Hey. Ouch, hitting a lady, well, what's his problem then? He's not used to fighting without the intent to kill, Kakashi stated plainly. He's so used to it, to the adrenaline, that anything else, well, look at him. He doesn't consider Ino a threat. What? Come on Shin-chan. I know Ino's weak, but if you don't consider her a threat then dispose of her. Don't just take hits. Naruko yelled from the stand. Ino stopped attacking. What? Not a threat? I was second at the academy. Only that Fat Run had a higher score. How am I not a threat to you, dead last? Shinku massaged his chin hit by a fist earlier and opened his mouth. You're pathetic. There was a moment of silence. What? You are pathetic. You scream. You yell. You toy. That's ugly. Horrible. It's like watching a kid play in the sand. It's disgusting. Horrendous. Putrid. I wonder if you ever faced fear. Fought anyone? Killed anyone? You're pathetic. Worthless. Insignificant. Zabuza nodded sagely from his spot. He was tempted of saying, "That's my kid right there," but unfortunately, he had been assigned 3 imbeciles. Ino growled, "Oh yeah? I'll show you fear then." Her hands went up to the familiar signature technique of her family. Kakashi I smiled. Well, if Shinku knows what's good for him, he'll dodge and Shinten Shin no Jutsu. He didn't dodge, Kakashi deadpanned. Kakashi, Sasuke said crisply. You suck. Kakashi nii, you're a horrible teacher. Kakashi nervously laughed. Well, I'm sure he'll have better luck at the next exams. Shinku's body cracked a smile, even as it was Ino inside who don't. Who stilled? She hadn't said that. Gekko Hayate narrowed his eyes. Considering Yojao was out patrolling, she had asked him to keep an eye out on her team. Well, he couldn't display favoritism, but he was just about to call the match set in that instant. What? Shinku's voice shrieked out. No. She was supposed to be in control. Peekaboo, his mouth whispered next. Guess we're not alone anymore, Shinku. He chuckled. Time to teach someone a lesson about privacy. Ino's eyes widened tremendously. It wasn't possible. It simply wasn't possible for anyone to commandeer their own bodies while the jutsu worked. The technique was unblockable once executed. Her father had told her. There's always an exception, brat, the voice spoke again. If I were you, I'd return to your body now before I decide to become creative. I swear, I am not kind-hearted like Outer. I will kill you, I will butcher you and rip your guts out of your very body, feast on your entrails as I devour your soul. You better leave, Ino-chan, or I might just swallow you whole and leave nothing for the hyenas. The voice whispered to her very ear, and for once, in her spirit form, Ino turned and gazed, straight into pitch-black pools of darkness coming from a red-haired demon. Inner smiled, before pulling his fist backwards. Bye-bye. With a feral smile, the punch slammed straight through the girl's spirit face and sent her flying out of Shinku's body, and back in her own. Shinku gagged, before opening his eyes. Ino gazed at him now shuddering in fear. So that's what Hibachi meant, she mumbled. That's what you're hiding. You're a nutcase. 2 minds in one body isn't possible. Shinku clenched his teeth. His heart spiked a little. That's what got Ami out of the ninja, It was him. You're a freaking psychopath. Time stilled. If for a second, time actually stilled. The heart drummed just a bit more. His eyes narrowed more. The glint shone through. A light sheen of chakra pushed to appear through Shinku's shoulders, the color of the chakra a malevolent purple. A feral-like mouth gently formed near Shinku's ear, before whispering 2 simple words to him. 2 words he desperately wanted to hear. Gut. Her. The Kirigaku now pushed through the air with enough speed and strength that Ino didn't dodge, or better yet, couldn't. Shinku's visage was one of animalistic anger mixed with the frothing desire to destroy and tear apart, and the strange thing on his shoulders seemed to merge with his upper body to truly form a demonic entity, yet the tip of the kunai stilled a mere inch away from Ino's stomach. The gruff hand of Asuma Sarutobi had stopped the attack. A small dribble of blood fell down the tip of the Kirigaku kunai, slowly traveling across it towards its handle. A small droplet fell on the ground. Calmly, the purple chakra slowly began to dissipate. Because of intermission from the Jounin of Team 10, I declare this match a victory for Shinku Harano. You heard the proctor, Asuma gruffly muttered. Now stop pushing. Shinku growled for a moment more, before pulling the kunai back and pocketing it. He spat at Ino's feet. You're a pathetic worthless coward. Hide behind your sensei as much as you like, but eventually you'll have to face the world alone. He turned and left, climbing the steps back to the balcony quickly, before outright disappearing through the closest door available. So, my adorable student is an adrenaline junkie with a split personality, Kakashi chuckled nervously. Isn't he just adorable? Naruko and Sasuke both nodded to one another, and then slammed their respective fists into Kakashi's precious area. Kakashi puffed in smoke, but still, they hoped he had felt the pain. I'll go look for him, Sasuke said, halting Naruko. You still have your match to fight, he added quickly. Naruko opened her mouth, about to say something, before crossing her arms over her chest. You're stupid or something, Uchiha. A Kage Bunshin later, and a Kage Naruko and Sasuke went off. The real Naruko meanwhile remained behind, gripping on the steel bar tightly. She was glad she couldn't hear the Kyuubi any longer. She didn't know what that snake freak had done something about, 5 elements seal, or whatever, but with that on she'd have no troubles with the fuzzy butt. She just had to keep quiet about it. Her eyes settled on Ino's still shaken form. On one hand, she couldn't understand why Shinku hadn't attacked back sooner. Whatever Kakashi had said, she hadn't understood the complicated words. She'd ask her mother afterwards. If only Yojao-sensei had been there, or Fu, but they were both out patrolling probably. She wondered why her father hadn't sent Kakashi Nii out there to patrol too. Or maybe he did, and the Kakashi that had watched until then had been a clone. Naruko-san. She gripped on the steel bar stronger, denting it slightly. The problem was that she was now alone, except for her father who was down there watching the proceedings with a keen eye. She was outright alone up in the balcony. Ohi, Hinata is talking to. Akamaru yipped in fear as Naruko's eyes turned angrily towards them. Do I care? Ah, Hinata clutched a small ceramic container in her hands. Ma made this for wounds. So? Naruko retorted, clicking her tongue. You getting anywhere with your words, or are you just wasting your breath? Why your friend was hurt, Hinata stammered out finally, ith thought. That stuff is probably poison anyway, Naruko hissed back, you can choke on it. Now that is very rude, wonderful, even their Jounin-sensei entered the fray. Hinata was just. Listen, old lady, that got a narrow affronted gaze from Kurane. I don't care. I don't give a damn and I don't want to listen to any other pathetic excuse she can come up with. When you're done babysitting her, try to get a child of your own before you hit the menopause. Now that's just rude, Kurane shot back. Naruko-san, PL please. No, and 1,000 times no, Naruko hissed. I wouldn't care even if you came walking on beans and whipping yourself. You're distracting me from watching the battles, so get the hell out of my personal space. Hinata retreated, her gaze downcast. Naruko returned to the battles, and realized she had missed the one in which the giant fangirl. She's a giant fangirl, Naruko mumbled. No. The puns, I missed all those delicious puns. Wringing her hands in the air, Naruko sighed. I just hope my turn comes soon. It wasn't difficult to follow Shinku's trail. Sasuke really had no troubles, especially because the boy predictably came across a dead end. It was a large room filled with pillars, from where a light shone down from the open ceiling. Shinku stopped in that room, his shoulders trembling and moving up and down heavily. Naruko, predictably, charged ahead with her usual bluntness. Shin-chan. The boy's shoulders froze, as a hand went to his forehead and through his hair. Ohi, Shin-chan. I'm talking to you. Why yeah. What was that all about? Naruko yelled. I mean. You were like. Please don't hit me, and then you went all, I'm gutting you, so. Her eyes softened, are you alright? Sasuke rolled his eyes, as he stepped closer. He still didn't say anything. I'm fine, really, Shinku mumbled. He smiled awkwardly, there's nothing wrong. The fist on the side of the face hurt. Naruko gripped him by the jacket. Then why are you scared, Shin-chan? I hate liars, and I hate people who lie to themselves even more. She then head-butted him as if the punch wasn't enough. Ouch. Shinku winced from the blow. What's wrong? Naruko asked again. You don't answer, I can play the headbutt game for a long time. Trust me, Sasuke commented. She's a Kage Bunshin, but she still can deliver quite a few headbutts before popping, and then Naruko would just send another. It's, I can deal with it on my own, there's. Sasuke winced. That's a wrong answer. Naruko slammed her head against Shinku's once more. Stupid idiot. We're a team. We solve problems together. Out with it, now. I fear for whoever marries her, Sasuke mumbled. She'd be the most violent wife ever. You said something, mister, I'll be an eternal virgin because I want a pure love. Naruko's glare silenced Sasuke right up. So. Naruko's eyes settled back on Shinku's own wide and scared ones. What happened down there? What did Ino do? What did she say that made you go ballistic? Shinku's throat felt parched as he spoke, I'm not alone. Duh, we're here, I know that. Naruko rolled her eyes. No, I mean, I'm not alone, in my head. Oh, Naruko blinked. Is the voice telling you to kill people? You shouldn't listen unless they're bad people, the girl nodded, and if it's a giant animal of some sorts, then you really should have told me you were a Jinhuriki to begin with. I didn't think there was another one, but... Dope, will you let him explain? Sasuke sighed. Come on now, we're not going to bite, Shinku, out with the full story. Shinku obliged. He spoke hesitantly at first, but then his voice became calmer with each passing word as he ended up spilling the beans. It was just meant to be a way to cope, but in the end, I just let him go. I mean, he can do most of the stuff I stumble with, and when things go down, he's there to give me a hand up. I know we're supposed to be the same person, but I can't help but believe he's the better Shinku out of us two. I wouldn't have survived half the stuff I went through without his help. Alright, Naruko shrugged. That was it? All right. Naruko replied, saying both words very slowly, enunciating them properly. Really? It's all right, Shin-chan. So you get a bit of a stab mania every now and then because of your evil twin personality. I get that. She chuckled, although. She gripped him by the chin firmly, her eyes narrowing. You in there, listen well. You make Shin-chan cry and I'll slap you. We're in the same body. Is she stupid or something? You think he got the message? She asked then, because I slap really hard, you know. What, your friends get headbutts and fists and you slap only your enemies now? Sasuke drawled out, there's something wrong with that way of thinking. Light punishment, dope. Naruko huffed as she let go of Shinku's chin. Hey now. Fists are for making friends. That works only in bromance stories. Like Ika Tag Team, which I clearly haven't read. Oh, Naruko's lips twitched upwards. So you did get a peek in. You keep dropping them in my library. With a fake cover. Naruko smiled brightly, well. I'm off to tell the boss. You all get back soon to watch me kick ass, alright. Shinku numbly nodded. In the end, Kakashi was right. They really didn't seem to care. You need something for the headache? Sasuke asked warily. He shook his head. Good, that's good. Then why did he have a feeling things would still change somewhat? The cage bunshin didn't disappear immediately, however. She slammed a hand against her head and exclaimed. I forgot. With that, she tackled Shinku. Team hug. Gaia. Shinku warbled out of his mouth just in time before Sasuke groaned, but followed sweet. Let go of me. There. All better. Naruko grinned mischievously, stopping the hug first and taking out a cage camera. Male Yaoi hug. There was a snap, and then she disappeared in smoke before Sasuke could properly lunge at her. Naruko stared at her opponent. With her luck, it had to be Kiba. Fortunately, her clone had just dispersed and everything was going to be fine. She'd just have to make sure Shin-chan didn't go on a stab mood where he could hurt himself. Really, she was used to having her own moods of the sort. It wouldn't be any different than that time of the month when her father always went fishing somewhere for the entire day. They'd just send Shin-chan fishing. I'm not going to go easy on you cause you're a girl, you know. Kiba yelled. You're done yelling like a moron. Naruko muttered back, shrugging. Really, such a lack of grace, who brought this little bitch in here? Shouldn't your owner neuter you if you're in heat, bitchy-chan? I don't understand you at all, Naruko, Kiba snorted. You weren't like this once. Like this how? Beautiful and perfect. Naruko rolled her eyes. Grow the hell up, Inuzuka, she assumed her fighting stance. Akamaru. Let's. Naruko's fist slammed straight into the Inuzuka's face, before her entire body spun to deliver a devastating kick to his side and pushing him against the wall from the brunt strength of the impact. "You had all the time to yap nonsense," Naruko muttered. "You should have trained, if you had the time to let your mouth run. Arg, this pisses me off." Kiba coughed as he tried to push his body out of the hole in the wall. Naruko didn't give him pause. Her fist slammed into Kiba's stomach with strength, soon followed by another and yet one more. Kiba coughed out blood as Naruko grabbed him by the arm and then threw him in midair, before jumping right behind him. In a moment, she spun on herself while in the air and kicked with the back of her foot the boy's body back on the ground, where it crashed lifting a cloud of dust. She landed gracefully next to him, dusting her hands off. Akamaru whined from his spot near Kiba. Naruko snorted. She hadn't given him the time to use his Inuzuka techniques because, really, who would be so dumb? She returned up in the balconies as the winner, holding up a bright smile as both Shin-chan and Yuki-chan were there. "So, you compared sausages while I was gone?" she asked innocently enough. "No," Sasuke retorted. "Ah," Naruko pouted. Shinka remained quiet as the last battles went by. In the end, there were 11 final contestants. Naruko Namikaze, who strangely ended up with number 1. Niji Hyuga, number 2. Gaara of the Sand, number 3. Sasuke Uchiha was number 4. Kankuro was number 5. Shino became number 6. Temari was number 7. Kabuto Yakushi, who had passed by the grace of not having fought anyone, since they were an uneven number, was number 8. Shikamaru Nara was number 9. Number 10 was a mist genin by the name of Kojuro. As luck would have it, Shinku Harano was number 11. It actually was luck, because it meant judging by the chart that he wouldn't fight until the second round. The more time passed, the more he became sure. That chocolate had to have brought him all the worse luck in the world, and now that he was rid of it, everything was going to be fine. Chapter 43, The Luck Shall Not Last. Inoichi sighed. "I can't work on him, Hokage-sama. There is a conflict of interest," the man stated. "Still," Minato pressed, "you are the best one in your field, Inoichi. I mean, it's either you or Ibiki, and I'm wary on using Ibiki after how he treated Anko's problems." Inoichi grimaced. "I can certainly hold my judgment impartial, Hokage-sama, but the fact is, my office and house and hobby are all in the same building. There's the risk of him meeting with my daughter, and after what happened in the preliminaries." "You watched the registrations, right?" Minato asked with his eyes calm and controlled. "There's the risk of him being a problem further down the road if it isn't nicked in the bud." "Why not Anko?" Inoichi suggested. "Her methods are milder than Ibiki's." Minato gazed at him as if he had grown a second head. "If I knew Kakashi wouldn't meddle, as it is, you are the best shot I have. Think of it as me asking you a personal favor, Inoichi." Inoichi looked back at the yondaime and sighed once more. "Fine, but we'll have to meet in the torture and interrogation department." Minato grimaced. "There are a lot of free rooms in the Hokage Tower. Not enough to ensure privacy, especially not from a certain teammate of his who knows this place like the back of her hands." Minato nodded. "I'll tell him to meet with you on a daily basis." "Daily? It is better to nick it in the bud, Inoichi," Minato replied. "I'll consider it a B-rank mid-range pay." "Don't be preposterous, Minato. I'll just leave the hobby of being a shopkeeper on the back burner for a while. I'm doing this as a favor for a friend." He exhaled a long breath. "I wonder what made our daughters fight each other so much." "Yeah." Minato closed his eyes. "On one side, I'm glad the fame and the renown didn't get to her head, but, on the other, I'd like her to have more friends. While her friendship with Sasuke and Kushina with Mikato's aided enormously, I can't help but feel the Hyuga clan is growing progressively distant. Konoha is living its longest term of peace ever, Hokage-sama," Inoichi said with his lips twitching up. "Nobody would be so stupid as to try to kindle old rivalries." Minato grumbled. "I hope so." The Hokage gazed outside to the bright and sunny day ahead of him, that he wouldn't partake in, because paperwork would kill him, if he didn't kill it first. Shinku Harano had a date. Shinku Harano was on a date. It was a normal, average, walk around Konoha for some sightseeing, some shop gazing, and a few random talks about long and short-range weaponry. He had been a ball of nervousness at first, but apparently holding hands was all that he needed to do for an afternoon walk to turn into a date. The lack of planning wasn't a problem. Konoha was a big village built on concentric large roads intersected by two main roads that were in a cross pattern. The simple act of strolling ensured more than enough sights. "What's that?" Fu asked, twitching her nose while making a beeline, pulling him along towards yet another shop's glass window. "That's a cafe, don't put your face against the glass," he added hastily. "Do you want to go in?" "My treat." Fu blinked, before nodding with a bright smile. They stepped inside, taking one of the tables close to the same glass window Fu had nearly stuck her face through. The waiter took a moment to deliver the menu before leaving once more, giving them the time to decide. Shinku flipped a page, cautiously looking at the prices and exhaling in relief. Unless Fu ordered one of everything, and then made it double at that, he should be able to pay. Tajuna's blood money had a use. He swatted away the dark thought. He was on a date, Fu was enjoying herself, he was enjoying himself. There was no need to bring Tajuna into this. There was no need to bring the shattered hopes of an entire village to the front of his mind. There, his brain had done it again. He ground his teeth lightly. Fu giggled. "Is there something funny?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "You always look like you're about to kill someone whenever you think really hard," Fu replied with her usual bubbly smile. "And how is that a funny thing?" "Because it's different from your usual face. Normally, you look like you're pretty harmless." Fu smiled even brighter. Shinku chuckled. "Different from my usual face?" he asked, his voice growing soft. Fu nodded. "Most of the time, you look like you wouldn't hurt a fly. Then something happens and you have to protect your teammates and such, and bam, you become a hero." "A hero?" Fu nodded stronger. "You came to save me up in Taki. Not even Shivuki-san went against the elders when they closed me in there. It takes a hero to go against the big bad, isn't that right?" I'm not a hero, really." Fu huffed, before giving a quiet nod. "For me, you are." She blushed lightly after those whispered words. Shinku's eyes returned to the menu. Well, it was more of a matter of taking something to drink, and he felt something sting him in the back of the neck. For some reason, his ears twitched as his hand went to grab the stinging object. He inclined his neck to the side. There was a small rubber sphere the size of a pea in his hand. "The lover's specialty," the waiter said, returning with a sleazy grin that felt all too familiar to his eyes. With the homages of the house for being such a cute couple. Shinku would have slammed his head against the table. The giant cup of vanilla and strawberry was apparently meant to be eaten with a single spoon, shared between the two. The waiter then made a small bow and went back in the kitchens. Shinku had no doubts the man would soon pop in smoke. His eyes looking around frantically for the hiding spot of his teammates, he doubted where Naruko went. Sasuke would be too far. He missed the incoming projectile until it was too late. An gulp. Fu giggled. "It's funny." Shinku swallowed slowly, his eyes back on Fu. "My turn now," Fu exclaimed, handing over the spoon. This wasn't happening. Well, it was. How difficult could? What was he doing? This sappy. Anam. Maybe he had died, and this was heaven. It was an awkward heaven where strange things happened, but still a heaven of sorts. A few tables away, Sasuke stood with his manga Kyosherry spinning beneath a pair of thick sunglasses. Exactly, why can't my fangirls get the message? That's beautiful." He wiped away a tear. "Shinku, you lucky dog." He was wearing a large fedora hat and a heavy beige trench coat. Naruko lecherously gazed with a snicker of her own, holding up a newspaper to cover her body except for two holes from which she looked forth. Yes, come on Shin-chan, fall into the dark side." The door of the cafe opened. "Shit," Naruko mouthed into her small radio near her neckline. "Alert code silver. I repeat, to all clones, alert code silver." A couple of pretty girls passed by the table, but a sudden wall of waiters going in the opposite direction hindered the view. Nariko sighed in relief. All right, no eye wandering for you, Shin-chan. I think that was a bit excessive, Sasuke snorted. Shinku's not the type to let his eyes wander. Yeah, because the Warrick no Jutsu doesn't work at all with men, Nariko snorted. Do me a favor, Sasuke, and stop living in fantasy land. All men peep. Some do it with more class than others do, but they all look. I do too. Sasuke sputtered. That's preposterous. Nariko gazed back at the table of her targets. Shit. They're gone. She stood up, all clones. Assemble. The waiter force popped into smoke a moment later. Let's go, Yuki-chan. All who said first dates can't end in glory clearly didn't have the sexy and beautiful angel Nariko-chan to help. I don't know what's more troubling, Sasuke remarked. You stalking them or you wanting them to end up the date in glory? Nariko looked back at Sasuke. What? Every first date that ends well must end with a kiss, right? Sasuke gargled out incomprehensible curses towards Jiraiya. Nariko just smirked, pitiful fool of an Uchiha, underestimating her powers. I'm full, Fu whined, sliding down on the nearest bench. The park in the afternoon had the laughter of kids in the background, of their mothers keeping an eye out for them, and of a few couples doing precisely the same things he and Fu were doing. Namely put, resting on a bench in the middle of the park. Shinku's eyes remained close. He was probably overly paranoid. There was no reason for Nariko, or Sasuke, to follow him through his date. They were probably training for the upcoming tournament. He hadn't yet heard a peep from Kakashi, however, and that was both a good and a bad thing. It was good, because it meant he had the time to go on a date. It was bad, because it gave more time for Kakashi to plan his training. Fu's head slowly came to rest on his shoulder, as her breathing evened out. The girl had fallen asleep. She didn't appear to have the endless amount of energy of Nariko, thankfully, but whenever she was awake she always did smile and jump around like an overreactive squirrel. He carefully brought his right arm around her shoulders. His ears twitched. He had heard that. He moved a tuft of hair from Fu's forehead to the side, behind her ear. Oh. Yes, he had heard that too. He calmly neared his lips to Fu's. Bit more, come on. Then he separated, without doing absolutely nothing. OHI. Nariko emerged suddenly from a sandcastle two children had been building in front of the bench. The two kids screamed in fear as they ran away, while Fu jumped up flustered, grabbing a hold of Shinku's neck and then looking around frantically for the source of the screaming. I'm trying to write a story here. Nariko yelled, brush and parchment in hand. Would it kill you to man up, Shin-chan? Sasuke snorted from his hiding spot. He gave points to Shinku. Na-chan. Fu blinked. Why are you covered in sand? Nariko blinked, and then dusted herself off. Nothing. Taking a walk on the beach. That's a sand square, not a beach, Shinku remarked dryly. Where's Sasuke? Sasuke stiffened. Nariko wouldn't sell him out. She wouldn't do something like that too. The Yuki-chan's keeping an eye out from that tree over there, Nariko shrugged. Sasuke flickered down, slamming a fist into Nariko's head. We decided it was each stalker for himself if they caught one of us. Nariko sniffled. But Shin-chan's such a tease. He was about to kiss Fu-chan and then he pulled back. It's unfair. Fu's hold on Shinku's neck tightened a bit. You don't kiss people in public, Shinku muttered back, there's a law about decency, which you always forget. Point for Shinku, Sasuke piped suddenly, as if remembering the Konoha law code only then. Okami, there's a law against stalking too, and we infringed it, Sasuke grabbed onto Shinku's jacket. Please don't tell anyone. I can't become a police officer with a blotch on the record like this one. All right. Awkwardly, Shinku watched Sasuke's face clear up. He had a surprisingly heated side too apparently. Good, we'll take our leave. Grabbing Nariko firmly, he began to pull her away. Nariko. How could you follow our wonderful teammate in his pure budding love trying to fan it towards the shores of depravity? I am ashamed. Naruko whined as Sasuke carried her away. Remember to use protection. There are kids in the park, Naruko. Sasuke's yell drowned the rest. Shinku chuckled nervously. I'm sorry. Fu shook her head. It was funny, she muttered, resting her head once more against his shoulder. The problem this time was that she was on his lap to begin with. I like this. Ah, yes. It's peaceful, she said. A few birds chirped by. People look happy. It's nice. Konoha is very peaceful, Shinku acquiesced. Maybe he had forgotten about it, but it was the truth. Konoha was peaceful. The people were happy. A light soft thing pressed against the base of his chin. He blinked, before gazing downwards just in time for another kiss on lips. Fu giggled. Kissing tastes like ice cream. Yeah, Shinku mumbled. It does. That night, Shinku walked back towards his house after bringing Fu back to her home like a drunken man. He felt happy. The world was beautiful. Everything was nice. He went to sleep with a bright smile on his face and a delighted expression. The next morning, he received a notification to head towards the Hokage Tower. Once, he probably would have been nervous as hell, but now he felt like he could take on anything and anyone. Did he already claim the world was beautiful? Yes. The world was beautiful. The smile on his lips remained etched on his face until he found himself waiting outside the Hokage's office. There, it slowly settled down to a simple upward line and a small humming sound. Harano. The Hokage's secretary remarked from her spot, the Hokage will see you now. Hi, with a nod, he knocked at the door while heading inside. Swallowing his nervousness, he took a few more steps forward. In the end, he stopped in front of the Hokage. Now, no need to be so formal, Minato smiled. Shinku nervously swallowed once more. You aren't in trouble. This concerns your preparation for the incoming tournament. Due to the status of high alert Konoha is currently in, with the risk of Orochimaru targeting the finals, I have to ensure each member of my daughter's team is free from outside influences. Shinku didn't speak, and so the Hokage continued. You will spend the mornings in the torture and interrogation department with Inoichi, both as a way to continue your therapy, Shinku winced, and also as a way to ensure Orochimaru didn't manage to take over. Has Kakashi spoken with you yet? Shinku shook his head. Well, I cannot in good conscience condone what he trained you up to become, but, at this point, it is imperative we get your particular situation under control. Particular. Minato exhaled. Shinobi have quirks. It's normal, it's understandable. Our jobs are stress-filled and you aren't the only one who went through this. It's always more difficult with shinobi from civilian families, but not particularly so. As long as you follow Konoha's laws you will find many won't care if you have, well, another personality. Ah, I see. We have agreed you will have another teacher for the month ahead. His name is Ebisu. He specializes on one-on-one teaching, and I'm sure you'll get along very well. You'll meet him this afternoon after you're done in the torture and interrogation. Furthermore, Ebisu had all but pleaded him to give him some respite from his usual student's energetic behavior. I understand, Shinku nodded. I'm sorry about wasting away your mornings in such a grim way, Minato smiled awkwardly. Won't give you much time to spend with your sweetheart, I suppose. Then again, she and Naruko will be busy with their own Baijuyo training, so. Shinku turned crimson, just like his name. By the way, due to their lack of shinobi, Takigakuer has asked Konoha to provide with a few Chunin both to patrol their lands and to teach their next generation, Minato added. If you need any motivation to work extra hard, I might just slip your name in the badge to send to Taki at the end of the tournament period. Hi. Very well, Minato smiled. You're dismissed. He saluted, turned, and walked out. The torture and interrogation department of Konoha was two things, surprisingly easy to find, and strangely filled with soothing pastel colors. At least, the entrance was. The receptionist gave him a curt nod, before handing over a non-disclosure agreement concerning anything he might see or hear or realize or ponder, or pretty much anything else within the walls. The room assigned to him was just a few corridors away from the entrance, not even a single level down. It was a perfect replica of Inoichi's office, barring the windows and with a pale white neon light on the ceiling. "This is just one of the unused rooms we use as storage." Inoichi's voice was smooth as he gestured for Shinku to sit. "I'll ask you a few questions before we can proceed with your visit." Shinku nodded. "You were born the 28th of March. Correct?" Shinku nodded. "Your parents are Mabuki and Kaizushi Harano, correct?" He nodded once more. "You are an only child." The questions were easy to answer, but he supposed an infiltrator wouldn't know half of them. "You once had a dog named Skippy, correct?" Shinku blinked, and then shook his head. No, animals." Inoichi nodded. "All right, now you're in the clear. Normally this routine activity would be done by a rookie, but I'm also in charge with your therapy, and so we're killing two pigeons with one stone throw." Inoichi grabbed a notepad and a pen, letting his shoulders rest against his own chair. "Tell me something about yourself." "My name is Shinku." "Continue," Inoichi said. "I'm 13 years old and a half." Inoichi began to scribble. Looks for confirmation before continuing his sentences. Insecure. Socially stunted. Shinku flinched at the words of inner. "Relax, nobody here will judge you or anything you have done," Inoichi continued, speaking with his soft voice. "Simply let your thoughts out. I like to bake bread, but I dislike when it comes out burnt. I can make cakes, and sometimes I manage eggs." Has to be continuously pressured into talking. "I like to read, but I stopped recently because I don't have any time. Escapes from reality. The Deranks missions I went on are." Stammers at the mention of missions. "Kakashi-sensei. Calls that man sensei. Now you're the one adding that." Inoichi stopped scribbling. His eyes settled on the glazed-over look of the boy. "Let me do the talking. This is getting boring." "What does he want?" "The story of our entire life." "Am I scaring you?" Inoichi asked quietly. "Are you afraid?" "It's the torture and interrogation department." "Who wouldn't be afraid?" Shinku retorted. "I mean, it's a pretty scary place, isn't it?" Inoichi scribbled, and inner spoke through Shinku's mouth. Yeah, let me guess what you're writing down now." The other personality emerged, the more uncomfortable and insecure the original one felt. It is a clear sign of trying to cope with some stressful event without aid. He appears to arrogantly assume knowing that anything I write down is easily predictable, and thus will flower. Parrot, card game. Inner's eyes narrowed as Inoichi began to scribble. The other personality demonstrates a keen intellect, thank you, and appears to enjoy acting like an over-glorified babysitter. Are you trying to rile me up, doctor? Inoichi stopped scribbling, and settled down the block notes and the pen. How? Superpowers, you know, like heroes, Shinku snorted. It's in the academy curriculum. Well, not precisely, it's in the cheat to pass the test section of the student code. The trick is in mentally following and reversing the movements of the top of the pen. A lot of people use them as if they were brushes, so by simply inverting the movements and picturing the kanji in your head, it is easy, and Shinku helps by keeping them memorized. And what if I told you that you're wrong, and nothing you said was actually written on the block notes? Inoichi remarked, turning and handing over to Shinku a glorified drawing of a few flowers. I'd say it's a code. Say it with flowers. On that, we can both agree, Inoichi nodded. But as you see, you were wrong. That depends. Was my plan to be proven right, or was it a way to make you stop scribbling? Shinku inclined his head to the side. You are not scribbling right now, are you? Inoichi clicked his tongue. You are confrontational, your other self. No other self crap here, Shinku snorted. We're the same person. I'm just the executioner. You act, think, and talk differently from the other dominant personality. Hence you are another personality. Inoichi stressed out. You act differently from the yondaime, or from the woman at the reception. That doesn't stop you from being human, and it doesn't stop you from being a shinobi. We are Shinku. I wonder, what is your opinion of Kakashi? He's a lazy teacher, but he knows what he's talking about, and if you survive, yes, he undoubtedly is a good teacher. Uzuki-san. She's sort of like a hen, an overbearing hen. Your teammates. They're friends, he stated. You hesitated. Shinku shrugged. I thought you would ask me about my parents next. What's your relationship with them? I love my parents very much, he replied with a small tight smile. Inoichi exhaled. He wouldn't get anything more out of him. What do you think about cutting this first day short? Excellent idea, Shinku nodded. So I can leave? This time, Inoichi was the one to nod. Taking the cue, Shinku was out of the department in less than a few minutes. A sunglass-wearing man with a lean build and wearing a long monochrome jogging suit waited outside, holding on a smirk. You must be Harano Shinku. You are Ebisu-san. Please, call me Ebisu-sensei. Shinku blinked once, before nodding awkwardly and making a bow. I will be in your care, Ebisu-sensei. Unseen by him, Ebisu actually held a fist up in the air while tears streaked down his eyes. Finally. After months and months of Kano Amaru's insolence, he had 1 month of training with a polite genin. He knew the Hokage was a merciful man. It would be a nice way to wind down. Not that he expected anything from the boy, he wasn't from any important shinobi family, and really, he was a trainer of elite shinobi and not common rabble. Very well, with a nod, Ebisu began to walk towards their training area for the afternoon. I generally train my students in a roundabout way, Ebisu began to speak. In what areas do you think yourself lacking, Harano-kun? Shinku looked up at the sky. All of them. The motto of the Chunin Corps is if you lack heaven, seek wisdom, be prepared. If you lack earth, run in the fields, seek advantages. Once you have both, any mission can be completed successfully. Ebisu's lips twitched upwards. What area do you think we should work the most, Harano-kun? Heaven or earth? Earth, he muttered. My chakra reserves are pitiful. Then on earth we shall work. You will need a diet of high proteins and carbohydrates, with a lot of physical training to go with it. Ebisu nodded every now and then, as he spoke, as if he really liked the sound of his voice. I will also teach you how to correctly utilize it. He supposed the boy could learn that much in a month. He had given a look at the battle chart and, judging by the opponents that would fight before him, he would either have to face a Kiri shinobi by the name of Kojuro or the heir of the Nara clan. Since the Nara was a clan renowned for its brain smarts, training the boy on physical prowess wasn't wrong. Of course, he doubted any member of the Nara clan would lose against a clanless brat, but he'd train him for a month and because of that, his trainer's name was on the line. He just had to make sure the boy would lose after putting up the toughest of all fights. He'd train him until the point where he'd bleed on the ground. Of that, he was going to make sure. Shinku didn't see the glint in Ebisu's eyes, hidden by the sunglasses. The training area they reached was apparently the hot springs. Ebisu didn't waste time, immediately walking over the water's hot surface. Shinku hesitantly followed. Assume a fighting stance, Ebisu remarked. We will at first spar. Shinku obeyed, holding his eyes on Ebisu's F. A fist connected with his stomach, forcing him to jump backwards. It didn't hurt like when Kakashi had done it through the genjutsu, and it wasn't as strong as the attacks from Suien or the Sound Shinobi. I was told you can withstand significant amounts of corporal damage, Ebisu said. Did this attack hurt you, just now? Shinku shook his head. The next moment, a kick got him in the sides just below his ribs. His eyes widened from the pain as he opened his mouth to cough out. Clutching his sides, he remembered too late he was on the water. The water wasn't warm. The water was scorching hot. He gagged, gasping for air as he emerged and began to flail around. His jackets weighted him down, but with effort, he managed to reach the shore and climb back up. Now I understand the strange resistance, Ebisu stated plainly, opening and closing the palm of his hand. It is not a bad idea, however I suggest removing it during this particular type of sparring. If that was your reaction to an attack near your kidneys, I highly recommend coming back here chest naked. Shinku neatly folded his now wet clothes on the ground, before returning on the pool's water. The breeze picked up. His luck finished. The next attack came with him prepared to parry it, but all he earned was to slide on the water's surface and end up crashing with his bare back against the rocky side of the pool. He pulled himself off, but Ebisu came at him with a fist to the right side of his face. Shinku spat blood, but remained afloat. "Now, attack back," Ebisu stated plainly. "It is my understanding you cannot initiate a spar for fear of harming your opponent," the man said. "Well, let me be extremely clear, I am an elite shinobi trainer. I cannot be hit by the likes of you, and I have successfully gauged your physical level already." Shinku breathed slowly, before pulling his right fist back and then forward towards him. Ebisu attacked right away, passing straight in the middle of Shinku's defense and bringing against the boy's face a fist. Shinku ducked. The knee came up and the result was the same. Shinku's eyes closed from the pain, but Ebisu's hands gripped the back of the boy's head and pushed it right back for a second knee hit. His head ringing, Shinku's vision turned murky with blood and tears as he fell in the water. "You're pitiful," he barely heard as his body fell through the water. "Waste. Why wasn't Inner intervening?" "Oh, right. There wasn't a risk of dying. This was just like the sparring of the academy. Nothing changed, in the end." He woke up to a cold shower of icy water. "We are not done for today's training," Ebisu remarked. "Begin doing push-ups." Shinku's head hurt him, but he managed to turn his body to the side and tremble his way up to his knees. Ebisu watched silently. He couldn't train the honorable grandson of the Sandaime with the whip and the heavy fist he normally used for the other shinobi, but the boy was different. For one thing, he was clanless, and secondly he had the honor of training under him. Ebisu had a lot of frustration to get out of his system, and he had an entire month to do so. When the night finally arrived, Ebisu dismissed him until tomorrow. He coughed lightly as he made his way home. It was the first time he returned with bruises actually. Usually the wounds were so grave he went to the hospital to get them patched up, but with the attacks he had suffered, there simply wasn't a need. He collapsed from fatigue on the bed. The morning came excessively soon the next day, and with his muscles aching a lot, once more, the cycle began anew. A week later, Inoichi exhaled as he delivered his report to the Hokage. "Shinku has decided I am an enemy, Hokage-sama. As such, I no longer deal with the outer persona, but with his inner whenever he steps inside. It doesn't help. I didn't think it would take so little to antagonize him, or maybe the place made him nervous. It's like trying to deal with a porcupine enclosed in its ball. I'm afraid there's little I can do but smooth out his stingers." Minato gazed at Inoichi for a moment more, before closing his eyes and giving a quiet nod. "It isn't easy, and pressuring someone to heal won't simply make him heal faster," Inoichi continued. "Once a month was probably for the best. I wonder if I shouldn't simply tell him," Minato mumbled. "Hokage-sama. I'd be doing Kakashi's game if I did that," Minato sighed. "I know he was patiently waiting all this time for someone, but really, of all possible people. I'm afraid I do not understand the context, Hokage-sama," Inoichi remarked. "Kakashi's the most loyal shinobi of the entire force, Inoichi. I'd wager my own life on it. If I hadn't relegated him to patrolling, he'd probably be pleading me to train the boy. Kakashi wants to leave a legacy to Konoha, Inoichi. He's chosen Shinku, apparently. Why? I don't know." The Yondaime reclined his head backwards. "That's probably what scares me. Still, if I may ask, what is it that Shinku hasn't been told?" Minato smiled bitterly. "He doesn't need to participate in the exams any further to become a Chunin, Inoichi. Have you read the reports of his missions? Power-wise, both Naruko and Sasuke could give a run to any Chunin or even Jounin, while Shinku would probably be beaten by the lowest of them, but on the other hand, he is a mature and bloodied shinobi who knows what is important on the battlefield and for Konoha. Kakashi didn't cuddle him, if anything, he probably broke him beyond repair, but at the same time he made him into a shinobi in little time." Inoichi frowned. "I think the main problem with Harano is that he has little to no trust in himself and his skills. Creating an imaginary friend, one stronger and smarter, is generally a mean for isolated children to cope with loneliness and stress. The split personality on the other hand is a disorder that manifests when highly traumatic events bring forth a detachment of memories. This hasn't happened yet. The personalities, inner and outer, share the same memories and remember the same things. They interact with one another. I didn't think anyone could feel lonely with Naruko and his team, Minato replied. It isn't as simple as that, Hokage-sama. Many can perceive loneliness differently. Similarly, friendships are viewed differently depending on the person. For some people, friendships are born within days and last but a summer, for others they are lifelong but slow to bud. I do not doubt Outer's consideration of his teammates as friends, but Inner refused to answer. Outer waits for others to tell him what to do, so that he can please them and find a place as a team player. Inner acts for his interests and shows no concern for the others. I dealt mainly with Inner this week, and I can state that his highest aspiration is to remain alone and safe. He isn't an aggressor, but a defender. A territorial bear, so to speak. That, mostly, scares me. Why? Because it means it wasn't Inner that tried to kill my daughter. If we consider Shinku a shinobi, then Outer is the voice, Inner is the armor, but, someone has to be the Kunao. Couldn't it simply be both of them? It is a possibility, Inoichi acquiesced, or maybe there's a third personality forming, splitting off like a branch from the first two, the one in charge of attacking. I also spoke with my daughter. She wasn't much off with her words actually, there are two minds inside of Shinku Harano. The problem is, what if they form a split personality? What can you do? It's too late to suppress one of the two. I cannot discern which the real one between the two is, and anyway, it is probable they both are Shinku. He wouldn't be able to function without both. Erasing the memory is out of question. The only thing I can suggest is to lay him off for a week. He needs time to recoup from the traumas suffered, to enjoy his hobbies and so on. He's 3 weeks away from the tournament, Minato stated plainly. You know, Hokage-sama, I have to ask, Inoichi said, crossing his arms over his chest. Why are you personally taking charge of it? Minato gazed long and hard at Inoichi, before replying. It's classified information. Also known as, Naruko found my Ika stash, the one not even my wife knows I have and that if discovered will land me on the couch for the following months, hence she wiggled out an accord to make sure Shin-chan would be fine for the tournament, because he looked kind of down the last time they saw each other. No, what I meant was, are his parents informed? They're both living, right? I didn't see the need, Minato remarked. Inoichi stared. Minato squirmed. You do understand that telling me from the get-go that he might have had family issues would have been for the best. Yes, but they are an inf. I'll be the judge of that, Hokage-sama, Inoichi remarked. I'll require their reports. Very well, Minato nodded. He sighed as he watched Inoichi leave. He spun his chair around, gazing at the vast extension of rooftops that was Konoha. It was truly a sad system, the shinobi one, when even kids had to kill their hearts. Shinku gazed at the clouds in the darkening sky. Ebisu had left after the daily spar or beatdown, followed by the excruciating agony of exercising with his body bruised. He closed his eyes, ignoring the cold of the water on his skin or the sensation of hunger in his stomach. He couldn't claim the man a bad teacher, no differently than he could claim Kakashi one. Sure, the disgusting protein shakes he had to drink felt horrendous, but it showed the man seemed to care about him improving. What now? He mumbled. Do we go back? No training a bit more? He hazarded. Training without supervision, soon the hot springs will close. Well, but they're hot springs, why not take a bath? He snorted. Bruised as he was, the scorching hot water was the last thing he wanted to feel. Oh my, a smooth voice called in the corner of his eyes. Are you all right? Shinku's gaze settled on the glass-wearing genin who wore purple and was among the finalists of the Chunin exams. What was he doing there? His hands glowed green softly, this level of damage. Kabuto clicked his tongue. Are you all right, Harano-san? The other genin knew his surname. Really? Why yeah, he mumbled back. He could feel his muscles distend as the pain slowly ebbed away. He got up to a sitting position after Kabuto pulled him upwards, before the apparently medic-in-training genin began to heal his back too. You must be training very hard with your instructor, Kabuto smiled. Shinku nodded numbly. Thanks, the boy murmured. Oh, it is nothing. I was heading inside the hot springs for a late bath, when I saw your form lying on the ground, thought you might have had a stroke, and required assistance. It is the duty of a medic nin to help any wounded shinobi of his village after all. Does your head ring? Shinku nodded numbly, and soon he found himself with the boy's hands over the side of his face. The head is one of the weakest points in a human body. Every other spot is trainable to resist impact except for the head. The eardrums are in particular nasty, because when you're hit on the side of your face, you lose coordination and balance. With the bruises gone, Shinku felt reborn enough to wobble onto his feet. "Thank you," he stammered out, making a bowing gesture, "I'm in your debt. As I said before, I'm training to become a medic nin." "It is our duty to help out," Kabuto replied. The boy then turned, "Well, if you'll excuse me, I better go before the hot springs closes on me." Shinku faltered for a moment, before hastily exclaiming. Wait, he stammered. "I'm coming too." He began to walk alongside the older genin. I had some questions." Kabuto smiled. He knew he was acting while completely ignoring Orochimaru's orders, but he wasn't stupid. There was no way he'd try to kidnap Sasuke Uchiha. For one thing, he didn't even know where they had brought him to train. For another, he supposed he could settle for the only teammate he could get his hands on. Chapter 44, Every little bit helps. It takes months of training to reach the point where chakra can be used to heal human skin. Kabuto spoke with a clear and vivid voice, as if the argument interested him a lot. It is a rewarding feat, but not for everyone. Medic nin training is tough, tougher than any other, and the exams, you can't make any mistakes. You have to memorize every little nerve and bone, because when you're rebuilding a body you can't allow mistakes. Taking dinner together at a nearby yakiniku hadn't been difficult to propose. It's actually a matter of yin chakra, and strange as it might seem, self-operating comes off easier than operating on someone else. You don't have to go against their chakra flow, and you don't have to force the chakra out of your body through your hands. Shinku nodded. He understood less than nothing, but he let the boy speak. "I'm pretty boring, ain't I?" Kabuto asked suddenly, his face sporting a small wry smile. "It seems all I can do is speaking about medical ninjutsu." Shinku shook his head firmly. No, it's interesting. I can't count the number of times I was wounded in alone. If I had known there was a way to... Be careful, Harano-san. I'm speaking as a medic nin in training for years now, and my father's the chief doctor at the hospital of Konoha. I practically grew up in the medical field. There isn't any shinobi who can improvise medical treatment with yin chakra on the fly. It's simply not possible. Kabuto shook his head. Although there are ways to reinforce with chakra a particular area in order to not sustain damage. That was as Yojao-sensei had said, when showing him how to destroy a wooden pole. Using one's own body yin chakra for healing is quite an advanced feat. It is also not practiced, because all medical textbooks always imply the user to be another, hence one has to imagine the entire healing process as if he was watching a mirror. Shinku blinked. That's pretty hard. Indeed, Kabuto smiled. But I'm sure you didn't just want to talk about medical techniques. Yes. Shinku awkwardly fidgeted for a moment. I wanted to know if you ever reached the finals before, and what to expect of the tournament. That is if you can tell me. Oh, of course, Kabuto shrugged. I did reach the tournament once, but I unfortunately didn't please the judges enough, and so I remained a genin. What's important isn't to win the battles, he added, but to demonstrate a calm and controlled personality, as well as a roundabout versatility. Generally, showing off an elemental technique or two is also a big bonus. Shinku grimaced. Your teacher didn't teach you any fire technique? They're the most common around Konoha. We're the land of fire for a reason, after all. No, I'm receiving training to increase my strength and chakra capacity, he mumbled. Fire techniques aren't in the deal. What about genjutsu? I think I can dispel illusions now, he awkwardly smiled. Calmly, Kabuto extracted a deck of cards. He poured some chakra into one of them, before handing it over. The name and surname, Shikamaru Nara, followed by a brief description of his clan, and what he could do, popped up. I have access to the medical records of Konoha's hospital. Apparently, Shikamaru had broken his left ankle when he had been very little. And then I add in any type of technique I can discover concerning my opponent, so that I can prepare myself against them. If you lack heaven, be prepared, Shinku mumbled. If you lack earth, take the advantage. Indeed. I couldn't collect much about Kojuro, but this, another card popped up, is what I have. Kojuro was a Kirigakuer shinobi from Mist, apparently versed in Kenjutsu and with a severe need of glasses. His signature's moves included the Kirigakuer's trademark technique of hiding in the mist and other water releases. So, Shinku mumbled. One of these two will be my opponent for my match. If you're lucky, Kabuto replied, you'll fight the Nara. He tapped on Shikamaru's card. The Nara clan prizes himself for being a wise and intelligent clan, but they have easy-to-avoid techniques related to the shadows, and the tournament area will be out in the open. A strategy one personally devised against him involves charging straight ahead from the get-go, before he can complete the hand seal for the shadow techniques. Shinku nodded. The problem would be this Kojuro then, there's little to nothing on him. And in 1 month, Kabuto remarked, things are bound to change anyway. Talking with the older genin turned easier by the second. Shinku had little doubt he'd be actually fighting the boy really. With the luck he had, he'd face off this Kojuro and lose in a painful way. He had accepted that his fight would be a losing one, but as long as he gave his best, he might just get his promotion. He now had freer mornings, too much to Inner's enjoyment. Kabuto remarked at the end of the dinner. If you want, I might have something that could help you out. Are you free tomorrow morning? Shinku smiled. Maybe his luck was returning after all. The next morning, he found himself walking alongside Kabuto in the artisan district. I admit I was curious at first with the strange way of your vest, but when I realized you had reinforced it with plates I couldn't help but admire your determination. I admit, a little part of me is worried of what you must have gone through, to wear armor even during your daily life. Shinku embarrassedly looked sideways. You never know when they're going to strike at you, literally. Ah, I understand, Kabuto smiled. If there was one thing Shinku had understood, was that Kabuto always smiled. For every little thing there was, he smiled without fault. It was with a smile that they stepped inside a dingy blacksmith shop that sold various shapes and forms of weaponry. Muramas-san is an old friend of my father, and one of the most reticent patients the hospital of Konoha has on a daily basis. He works on chakra triggers tied to weaponry and protective gear. The heat of the forge in the back made Shinku's skin flush, as the scattered pile of weapons on various benches all looked menacing, neither shiny nor particularly lustrous, and the vibe they emanated was pretty clear. They weren't meant to look pretty, but to do their job. Kunao with slightly prolonged tips curved at the end, kunao swords, pronged kunao, saps and sai, and many more types all stood to attention, like old military glories waiting to receive their medals. Old shinobi armors hung from the walls, while a few recent ones stood open and cut in pieces, showing their inner chain mails or steel plates. There was apparently more than one model of armor available. Well, a burly armed man with quite a few scars over his arms and face remarked from the counter. It's not my fault the medics fret over any little nick and scar. Grumbling, the blacksmith stood. He was a monster of a man, tall at least 2 meters, bald and with scars covering practically every inch of his skin. His right ear seemed cut off neatly, only a twitching little flesh bit remaining behind. His eyes were dark, and he was wearing nothing more than a pair of shorts. Muramas-san, this is my friend, Harano-kan, Kabuto said with his smile still on his lips. I thought you might help him. Are those steel plates in your jacket, or are you happy to see me, Harano? The blacksmith asked with a dry chuckle. The man neared with his eyes inquisitive. I see, the design is crude and you just held them with steel wire. It has merits, well, merits better than being without, but any shinobi worth his salt could follow the stitching pattern and avoid those areas when attacking. Unless in poor illumination, but I suppose those things clink too. Shinku found himself without his jacket the next moment. The idea of putting cloth between the wire and the plate to avoid itching shows at least you gave it some thought. What was it, crude on the field repair? No, Shinku stammered. It's homemade. Muramaze laughed. Why not wear the flak jacket to begin with? I recognize these plates, it's steel and of good quality. You find these in Jounin vests, not in the Chiryunin ones. Furthermore, considering their sizes, they're meant for field operatives. What happened to the previous one? I couldn't wear a flak jacket for the Chiryunin exams, Shinka replied, so. Now that's an idea, I didn't think of that, Muramaze mumbled, I could sell the concept to the worrywart parents. Outfit your kid with reinforced jackets for the Chiryunin exams, increase their chances of survival. Wherever there's the words increase and survival, people flock like crazy. Anyway, what's the deal with coming into my humble shop today? Kabuto kept up his smile, judging by the state, can you repair it? Repair it? Why should I? I mean, if you want, kid, I can make you a honest price on another Jounin flak jacket. I keep the steel and this prototype as a start, and you can repay me back monthly if you want. There is still the tournament in little less than a month, Muramas-san, Kabuto replied. Harano-san here is participating. He might be going against Akiri Shinobi. Oh, those bastards, the blacksmith growled, I hate their cheap shots. When I was on active duty I had more than one encounter with those sons of... He grimaced, this wouldn't help you at all against one. They aim for the unprotected parts. But if you can't wear a flak jacket for the tournament. He looked at the jacket, how about a deal? Shinku inclined his head to the side, in apparent wait. I have a few prototypes I need field tested. Normally I hire a group of genin and have them blow their fingers off. Kabuto's right eye twitched. Kabuto here is usually one of those I hire, Muramaze smiled, if you help me out until the tournament, testing, and whatnot, I'll make you something to keep you safe and that won't look any different from your usual jacket. Before Shinku could speak, Muramaze brought up his right hand, wait. I'll also add in, for the sake of clarity, long sleeves. I can only come in the mornings, Shinku remarked. Oh, it's fine, it's fine. We're up and about at 4 anyway, Muramaze shrugged. By the way, you're the Harano's son, right? Shinku nodded, flustered. Good honest folks they are. If you work as hard as they do, then there's no need for Kabuto to vouch for you, he winked towards Kabuto, who nervously chuckled. Well, you take everything you need from the jacket because when I'll be done with it, here the man grinned, you won't recognize it at all. He wondered if he should have told the man he had the money to pay for it, but then again the job was probably expensive. How was he going to field test the stuff anyway? It wasn't like he could loan a training ground or some empty hole in the ground. There was a hole in the ground he could use. Kakashi-sensei would totally understand. Anyway, you need anything else, boys? Oh, yes, Kabuto remarked. I'll be fighting against a long-range specialist who uses wind to swat away light projectiles. Do you have anything that can work against that, Muramas-san? Wind? From Suna maybe. The blacksmith turned thoughtful. I could make you some heavy-tip kunao, but depending on the strength of her gusts, you'd be better off getting in close and personal. The problem with long-range specialists is always the same, they always believe they can pull off their techniques faster than their enemy can close the distance. Versatility makes the shinobi, not going all out on a single front. Speaks one of the long-range specialists in the flesh. Kabuto remarked with his lips twitching upwards. I've got the scars to prove it, kid, Muramaze snorted back, half of these? I got them from fast bastards. I was lucky my teammates were faster, but on a one-on-one it's being versatile that keeps your guts in your stomach, the blacksmith nodded. I'll remember those words, Kabuto nodded. You do that, helmet, the blacksmith replied. Anyway, if she uses wind, how long range is she? Wind does disperse the further away you are, but normally, I'd suggest using a fire technique against her. I thought about that too, Kabuto replied, turning thoughtful, I'll have to polish off my katon skills. I'm sure you'll do your old man proud, Muramaze acquiesced. And maybe, because of me helping you out, you might forget to close the window next time I end up in the hospital. Ahaha, how funny you are, Muramas-san, Kabuto smiled with a hand to his mouth, you are scheduled to come by the next week, yes? I might just tell your doctor to go for a full body checkup. I give, Muramaze mumbled. Take this by heart, kid, he whispered towards Shinku. Don't mess with your health close to a doctor. The next morning, for maybe the first time in a while, he woke up at the same time of his parents. He cursed as he realized that, standing up from his bed and quickly turning off his alarm watch, he could hear their forms moving about in the kitchen. His body still ached from the afternoon before. The sparring had been as brutal as always, and he wasn't in the mood to tell his parents why he had a broken lip. He slid open the window of his room, shuddering slightly at the morning breeze. Fully dressed, he jumped out. At the beginning of his genin career, he wouldn't have done something like that in 1,000 years. Now, he could. It was a small thing, comparable to when he had nearly slipped on that rainy day before his mission to Taki, but it was a thing. It was something he now could do. He could avoid his parents by jumping out of the window. He was avoiding his parents. Taking to the rooftops wasn't difficult. Nearly colliding against an Umbu 5 seconds later was a new experience. "Shinobi identification number please," drawled out the Umbu, his voice bored. "Reason for being out at night?" Shinku blinked as he fumbled with his pockets. He had his Shinobi identification card on him anyway, and as for the reason, "I'm going to work, near the artisan district at Muramas-san's blacksmith." The Umbu shrugged, gave a quick check at the registration code and noted it down. "Very well, you may proceed." 5 minutes later, the same thing happened again. Shinku took to walking on the streets after that. Security was uptight around the village. He hadn't noticed before, but the number of shinobi patrolling or going around was now noticeable in the early morning. "Ah, Harano-kun," he stared blearily at one of the shinobi in patrol, before he put the man into focus. "Iruka-sensei." "Well, I'm no longer a sensei to you now," Iruka chuckled. "You're out training so early." "I'm in the finals," he replied with a shrug, "need to work hard." He didn't correct the man on his assumption. "I'm glad," Iruka said, "I'll come to cheer you on." "Thanks, sensei." There wasn't any heat behind his words. Those were the common words any teacher would exchange with any student. They were second only to, "I knew you could do it." "How's your team treating you?" "Everything fine?" the man asked. "Yes," Shinku nodded, "we're all training very hard, at least," he supposed. "Well, I don't want to hold you up. It's been nice seeing you again." "Likewise sensei," and with a nod of his head, Shinku was off. Nariko whined pitifully from her spot in the secret training ground near Konoha. "Unfair, unfair, 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 unfair. This is unfair." Yojeo flipped a page of her Jounin Sensei for Dummies manual, before giving a condescending smile to the girl. "You tried to hide something of this importance to me, young miss? Do you have any idea what could have happened if Jiraiya hadn't realized your chakra was acting strangely?" Kushina barked back, holding her position. "You'll stay in the Caesar position on beans until I say so, do you understand me?" "But no. You could have endangered the entire village. This is for your safety as well. What if the seal hadn't been just a simple 5-point? What if it had disrupted the 8 trigram one?" Kushina sniffled, "You can't act like this." Nariko remained silent. "Is there something else you didn't tell me?" Kushina prodded. "I'll find out anyway, Tabane." Nariko clenched her fists. She mumbled, "I don't want to become Hokage." She looked at Kushina then, "Not without earning the position. I mean, sure being Hokage would be cool but I want to be chosen because I'm the best, not because it was Dad's job." "What brought this on? Don't you think it's unfair?" Nariko said. "I mean, what I have. Don't you think it's unfair?" Yojeo stopped flipping through the pages and started to gaze at Nariko, who was squirming in an effort to find the right words. "You know, it hurts when you get stabbed or sliced, but I heal in seconds, right? I killed in the forest of death and it was easy, so easy. I just had to take my hand and throw a fist and it was over. It was so easy." Bitterly, Nariko's eyes turned watery. I didn't want to, I even preached Shinchan against it, and then, in the end, I'm the one who went down to it first when I saw one of my friends on the ground. I'm not really a good preacher if I can't follow what I preach, right?" "Oh." Kushina mumbled, getting down on one knee near Nariko. No, you did the right thing, Nariko. Nobody faults you for being angry at seeing your teammate on the ground." "It was the blood," Nariko mumbled, "there was so much, he was covered in it and he wasn't breathing, and I started to scream at him to wake up, cause you can't fall asleep when you're that wounded or you never wake up. I don't know what I would have done if he hadn't woken up, I mean. She sniffled, I don't know what I'd done if it had been Sasuke, but Sasuke would never end up like that, so he's sort of easy to forget about. Naruko made a hesitant smirk, but the smirk faltered. I mean, Shin-chan was the one on the ground, he was there protecting us, me, and Duck Butt, and I didn't think it would ever happen, and tears began to fall down her cheeks. And I realized I was being a hypocrite. I went on thinking how we'd protect Shin-chan, me and Sasuke, because he's weaker than us and all. I thought of him as a friend, a teammate, but I never considered him at our level. That's probably what I'm trying to say is, if it had been me, the one still awake, without the Kyuubi, what am I? I mean, Shin-chan has got nothing, but hearing from Dad he carried both me and Yuki-chan to safety and would I have been able to do the same without the Kyuubi? I mean, isn't it unfair for me to use it? Kushin aside. I'm glad that you think like that, Naruko, but you have to understand that everyone is born with different gifts. Some are born with special chakra while others are born with Dojutsu, bloodlines, or specific techniques only their clan can execute. But you see, this simply makes everyone different and special in his own way. I'm sure you would have come up with your own way of protecting your teammates, if you had been powerless, just like I'm sure Sasuke would have gone through the same thing. What's important isn't the power you wield with your hands, Kushina gripped Naruko's hands, but what your heart tells you to do with it. She pushed Naruko's and her hands towards the girl's chest, where the heart was. That's what's important, to have a good heart. Mom. Naruko pitifully began to sob as Kushina hugged her. Hush, crybaby, my little crybaby. Yojao quietly excused herself. She also had to take notes, many notes. Sasuke watched the pond's surface shimmer under the movements of the bamboo bridge, which filled with water and then went thunk to release its contents inside the pool. The koi carp swam around without a care in the world, and as he closed his eyes, he took a deep breath. It was the middle of the night, and everything was silent. His ears perked up slightly. Father. Son, Fugaku replied dryly, his arms crossed in front of his chest and his body standing a few feet away from his son. What are you doing? Thinking, Sasuke said. Itachi used to do the same thing, Fugaku replied. He fell quiet a moment later. You should go to bed, it is getting late. Father, Sasuke said suddenly, as Fugaku already had begun his retreat. The man stilled. Do you ever regret it? What? Nii-san, not having told him everything you wanted to tell him, Sasuke mumbled. Like. Regretting what you cannot change will not change anything, Fugaku replied, his voice cut and dry. You should concentrate on training your body to hold your eyes' power and in keeping that despicable man's seal under control. I know, Sasuke murmured. Still, I think the elders are wrong. He opened his eyes, gazing at the stars. I don't think the Mangekyo is a tool for war, there's just too much pointing against it, he said. The problem of youth is to believe they are always right, Fugaku snorted. The problem of old fools is to think they are never wrong, Sasuke retorted. Itachi followed the elders' desires, and when they no longer had a use for him they threw him away like a broken toy. His voice heated up. I will not enter Umbu, father, he said. I will enter the medic corps. Fugaku clenched his fists. Why? These precious eyes of the clan, they could have been ripped out with ease during the Chunin exam, Sasuke hissed. It wasn't because I was an Uchiha that they weren't. It wasn't because I had a great power or a great renown that they weren't. It was because my teammate withstood blows until he could no longer stand, gritting his teeth and carrying on defending my unconscious body. Being Rookie of the Year meant nothing in the end. It was the dead last of the class that saved my life, he chuckled bitterly. And I realized it then, Itachi Nii's words, so that it doesn't happen again, he closed his eyes. The Mangekyo can only activate with the great sense of loss one can feel from the death of his closest friend, so that it doesn't happen again. It is so that another death of such intensity, of such agony, will never happen again. That is what the Mangekyo is about. It isn't about killing the enemy, it's about protecting those dear to you. The Sharingan isn't meant to be used for war against the enemy, but as a tool to defend your loved ones. Fugaku didn't say a word as he left, but then again, Sasuke doubted he would have. His father was too prideful, but swallowing one's pride, that was generally the way towards enlightenment. He wondered as he gazed at the stars once more, those twinkling masses of light up in the sky, if such a beautiful piece could last forever. It truly was beautiful. His neck hurt, but he clicked his tongue against his teeth and suppressed it. He didn't need more power, he didn't need to find out anything from Orochimaru. Everything he needed to know, he knew. Ebisu slammed his fist against his right arm, but he forced the attack back with a left hook. The man avoided the blow, halting his incoming kick. Shinka gripped at the retreating fist of the Jounin, twisting his body and pulling close to deliver an elbow strike with his left arm. The Jounin slid backwards on the water, settling his glasses back on his face. Very well, Ebisu acquiesced. You are finally starting to show your teeth. I like to call them fangs, Shinka remarked dryly, and we came up with a little something we wanted to try, he added. Oh? And what would that be? Ebisu retorted. Shinka just smiled, moving into position with his right leg behind extended and his left one flexed in front of him. His right hand down to his side and his left forward, the boy smiled with a feral smirk. Come and test us, Shinka chuckled as Ebisu charged ahead at a low speed. Ebisu went with his left hook, and Shinka jumped backwards with his left leg only of a small little jump, before slamming the left foot on the water's surface to let it ripple. In that moment, Ebisu faltered and Shinka's right foot came forth with a drizzle of scorching water for the man's face. Twisting in midair, using his hands to hold himself afloat, he completed the spin with a kick to the side of the man's face. At least, it would have been a kick if Ebisu hadn't parried it with his left hand and had proceeded to hold onto his ankle. I am still waiting, Shinka growled lightly. Was this what you wanted to show? It is a pathetic attempt at something that wouldn't hurt even an academy student. Soon, his ankle twisted together with his entire body as he crashed with his back against the water surface. He spluttered and gagged for air, and in that moment a bullet of green chakra slammed with both feet straight into Ebisu's chest, sending the man to crash against the rocky wall. Don't you bully my Shinka-kun! Fu exclaimed huffing, standing on her fluttering green wings of chakra as he grabbed a hold of Shinka's hand to pull him back up. Holding a pout on her face, she brought him back to shore. Shinku exhaled, sputtering out the bathwater. Gah! He was pulled down, his head suddenly on Fu's lap as the girl chirped with a content smirk. I got some free time. And when I think I'm about to surprise you, I see that Badmina bully you. Really, she huffed, so, she giggled. Are you surprised? Ah, yes, he acquiesced. I am. Fu smiled as if she had just won a prize. Good. Can we go on a date? Is my teacher still knocked out cold? Shinku asked. I can make him disappear if that's the problem, Fu replied calmly, without any heat in her voice as she gestured for her flesh-eating bugs. We can hide the bones in the forest. You didn't say that, Shinku replied. Fu giggled. I was joking. Really, her left hand gently went to caress Shinku's hair. But I don't like seeing you hurt. Shinku chuckled. I get hurt a lot. Fu pouted. Well, then we'll just have to stop it from happening. How's your training going? Fu huffed, playing with a lock of his hair. It's boring. Chumei and I are doing everything we're told, but it's always about doing it faster and doing it better, she pouted. I got free time today so I flew over as fast as I could. Chumei. Oh, Fu widened her eyes, right, the Nanabi. Her name is Chumei, or, well, its name is Chumei. It doesn't have a gender so. Ah, Shinku blinked. Can it hear us? It says that if you hurt me, she'll make sure to eat you. I told him not to, but it insisted. Well, nice to meet you, Chumei-san. Fu blinked. It said flattery will not stop him from eating you if you make me sad. Date. Shinku said with a bright smile, as he tried to stand up. Later, Fu replied with a giggle, holding him down. I like playing with your hair, Shinku-kun. Shinku exhaled. Well, There were only 2 weeks until the tournament. He was going to be ready. He knew it. Chapter 45, In the Mist Does the Blood Run Crimson? He could do this. It was early in the morning, and he could do this. He just had to tell his parents he intended to go to Taki on a semi-permanent basis after the tournament. They wouldn't even realize he was gone. Maybe he'd even tell them he had a girlfriend. Still, as he heard their footsteps going through the kitchen, he took to the window once more. He'd do that tomorrow. Muramas-san chuckled as he watched his part-timer start carrying the heavy stuff around the shop. He had told the boy to come at 4, and he was there at 3:30 every morning. "You're really working hard for the tournament, aren't you?" he asked, watching as the boy exhaled while dropping a crate of scrap metal that he had to melt near the forge. "Hi," Shinka replied. I have somewhere I want to go as a Chiryunin," he muttered. "Oh? Is it a girl?" Muramaze smirked. "It's always a girl." The boy turned red and the blacksmith just chuckled, before starting the fire of the forge. He was so used to the familiar heat that anywhere else was simply cold for him now. "You sure you're ready for such a commitment anyway?" Muramaze said after a few hours of silence, in which Shinka had kept on carrying the refuse crates close to the forge for remelting. "When you're young you always think your crush is your one true love. Then you grow up and it's no longer true," the blacksmith chuckled. "You shouldn't make life-changing decisions without thinking about them for a long while." Shinku didn't reply. I know it's none of my business, but what did your parents say about it?" "I didn't tell them," Shinka replied. "I didn't plan on." "You know, boy," Muramaze said. "I'm sure they'd like to know if their son's planning to leave for another village early on." Shinku bit his lips. "I don't think so," he shook his head. "Is there anything else I have to carry?" "Nah, man the counter and open the shop," Muramaze replied. Murama's shop did have a few customers in the early morning. Shinobi who were low on stocks acquired bundles filled with a varied assortment of kunao or ninja wire, while the shuriken sold by the dozen. It was no different than watching women shop at the market, weighing, checking the quality, analyzing the imperfections, but with shinobi and kunoichi. The fourth basket of assorted kunao and shuriken he sold belonged to the same girl he had seen in Niji's team. Hey, Tenten was her name, if he recalled correctly. "You work here?" "Only for this month," Shinka replied, letting the conversation die down as he ringed up the price. "Aren't you worried for the finals? Shouldn't you be training like crazy?" the girl asked, grabbing her purchases. "I train in the afternoons," Shinka replied. "And Murama-san is helping me with something for the finals, so I help him back in the mornings." "Oh? Then I'll come by and watch, if you don't mind." Shinku awkwardly smiled. "I doubt anyone will be interested. There are better fights earlier on." "You mean the boring ones?" Tenten rolled her eyes. "We all know how those are going to end." "I'm more interested in seeing that Suna bitch bite the dust," the girl growled. "If she manages to get forward, punch her for me, all right." "I doubt I'll get that far," Shinku's lips twitched, "but I'll try." Tenten waved goodbye and left, leaving Shinku back to his job at hand. He needed a fire technique, now that he wondered about that. Kabuto passed by during the lunch break, and together the two of them went to grab a bite at the yakiniku shop once more. "Katon techniques that are easy to learn," Kabuto hummed thoughtfully. "The fire flamethrower and the fireball are the basic fire techniques of Konoha. The Sarutobi clan and the Uchiha clan are supposedly very good. You could ask your teammate about that." Shinku shook his head. "I don't want to impose. I'm sure he's busy with his training." "Well, one of the easiest tricks I know of to create fire is to imagine your chakra coming out in flames from your stomach, rising up like some sort of forge fire all the way to the start of your throat and then expelling it out directly," Kabuto replied. "Holding the tiger seal is also helpful for that endeavor." Kabuto smiled. "Another easy usage is to channel chakra towards your hands with the tiger seal and then imagine it turning into flames. I tried it once with my chakra scalpel and I nearly burned my fingers off, but the practice makes the shinobi perfect." "So, tiger seal?" "Indeed. I know of a person who is really into researching new techniques, and sometimes he can spend weeks fixating on a single hand seal and seeing how using it changes techniques, Kabuto replied. However, you should watch out if fire is actually your chakra affinity or not, Kabuto remarked. While it is true that the majority of the Konoha population has a natural predisposition for fire chakra, it doesn't mean everyone has it. You might have water affinity, or earth, or lightning. Wind is the rarest of Konoha's affinities, but it can't be excluded. Ah, how do you find out? Kabuto kept up his smile. Normally, you use a thin strip of paper that comes from a chakra-grown tree. You channel chakra through it and watch the results. If it slices its wind, burns its fire, turns soggy its water, crumbles its earth and crackles its electricity. Kabuto calmly took out from one of his pockets such a strip of paper. The second most common affinity in Konoha is lightning, and it is swiftly followed by water. I have a water affinity, for example, which is why I suck at fire manipulation. The boy awkwardly sighed, and unfortunately, I know no water techniques worthy of the name. He handed the strip over to Shinku. Try channeling chakra through it. I admit I'm curious about what your affinity is, Haranokan. Where do they sell these? Shinku mumbled, grabbing the piece and letting chakra run through it. He didn't know why he expected something more. Maybe, just maybe, he had some rare and powerful affinity that would pop out and... No. Of course not. The paper burned to a crisp. He had fire affinity. He was just like the majority of the Konoha population. In specialty shops, Kabuto replied, holding a smile on his face. Well, it appears that you might be able to learn a fire technique in less than 2 weeks. I'd recommend something special, however. It is easy to go with the fireball and the flamethrower, but coming up with a technique of your own wouldn't be bad at all. Shinku shook his head warily. I don't think I have what it takes to create a technique from scratch. Well, Haranokan, you won't know until you try. The afternoon meeting with Ebisu was strange. The trainer actually coughed, before saying, Harano-san, his eyes fixed on the boy, I think I overstepped my boundaries in training you, and for that I apologize. I would like to start our training anew, if that is all right with you. Why? Was there something wrong, Ebisu-sensei? Ebisu had tears in his eyes. Such a proper boy. How could he have thought of using him as a stress relief, when he clearly needed a break from whatever hell he had gone through? Especially after the Hokage had told him that if something bad happened to the boy, he'd find himself transferred to the deepest outpost near Uegakure. He was too young to die. Ahem, anyway. Ebisu said, I have scrunched up some data and I think we can start working on some chakra techniques now that you have properly built up your capacity. Shinku just nodded. Now, reinforcing one's body area with chakra is a key technique. That night, Shinku returned home without a single bruise. He actually was somewhat happy about that, so much that he missed the glaring obvious sign of a light on in the kitchen. Shinku, the boy blinked and stilled midway through his step. I heard you reached the finals, congratulations. His mother was standing there, a cup of coffee in her hands. Your father's holding the shop alone, I hope he doesn't burn it down if I'm not there. Hey Mom, Shinku whispered softly. Shinku, Mabuki said. When were you planning on telling us? Shinku remained quiet. Answer me. Mabuki snapped, when were you planning on telling us you had passed the first 2 exams? Shinku flinched, averting his gaze. You always do that. I ask you something and you don't answer, Mabuki sighed. Where did I go wrong with you? I don't know. Did you do anything to begin with? Shinku replied calmly. Right, this argument is getting old. I'm not a kid any longer, Mother, he muttered, I don't need you breathing down my neck. That time's gone. Maybe I should have. You could have been the first of the class if I had pushed you harder. I let you go and you became the dead last, of course, she exhaled. You take after your father in that. No daughter of mine would have ever fallen so low. Yes, sorry for not being a female like you wanted me to be. You know I love you anyway, Shinku, Mabuki replied with a soft voice. Why can't you try and open up? You don't have to push us away, dear. I have a girlfriend, Shinku said suddenly. I want to try and aim to become a jounin, he added, clenching his fists. I'm going to pass the exams and become a Chiryunin, so that I can go to Takigakuer and be with her. His face turned red. I'm no longer a kid, Mom. Oh, Mabuki blinked. You're too young to start living on your own, she said after a small moment of shock. And I won't approve of any girlfriend I haven't talked with at least once. I've been living on my own since you started working with father, Shinku hissed back, and there's nothing to approve. You're just a child. Mabuki snapped, this discussion is over, Shinku. I'm your mother, and as such I know what's good for you. I'm glad you decided to aim your dreams a bit higher if unrealistically, but there is no way I'll approve you going to live alone. You don't get it, do you? Shinku shook his head. There is nothing to approve. You're done deciding my life. Oh, really? Mabuki raised an eyebrow. Then how about you leave? I could always use a free room. Then why don't you free that room? Shinku snarled back. What are you expecting, For a girl to pop down from nowhere. You shut up right now, young man. You don't get to speak to me in such a way. Not after everything I've sacrificed to grow you up. Sacrificed? For me? What did you sacrifice, Shinku hissed. You sacrificed nothing. I want to know when was the last time we sat down to eat dinner as a family, all of us. Work comes first, doesn't it? Well, keep going to work then. Drown yourself in it. What would you have me do? Stay in this house, when there's that room. Shinku closed his eyes. So, in the end you're that bitter I wasn't born a girl. It's not about that, Mabuki whispered. You were too young, but, well, your father and I decided to try again. You could have had a little sister or a brother, but then, the Kyuubi attacked in October and I ended up under the rubbles of the market district. When they dug me out there wasn't anything to do, I had been pierced by a metal shard from side to side, they could barely save my life and the shock was too great. Why didn't you tell me? Shinku muttered back. Because you were, and still are, too young. Mabuki yelled back at him. That's what parents do, they shield their children from the bad things in the world, and they make sure they don't commit mistakes. It's not a mistake, what I want to do. You say this now, Mabuki hissed, you don't know how the world works. You think killing someone makes you an adult now. What? No. Shinku spluttered out, that doesn't. You want to be independent, Mabuki snorted, you wouldn't have survived a single day out of Konoha if it weren't for your teammates being who they are. I'm pretty sure they had to carry you through all their missions, the woman continued speaking, while you lagged behind. That's not true, he hissed. Really? Well, then you don't mind if I come and see you lose at the tournament, Mabuki rolled her eyes. You probably fought a girl or something to get in anyway, there's no other reason you. Fine. Shinku slammed his right fist on the table, I get it. Dead last Shinku can't do shit to save his life. He snarled, well, I'm done talking with you. I'll be out of your hair by the end of the tournament, so you can go back to work, stop worrying about me and while you're at it you can even die in that damn bakery for all I care about you. And with that he stormed off, slamming the door strongly shut behind him. Really, why was it so difficult for people to understand? He wasn't doing anything strange, was he? At least with his father he could have talked. His mother simply decided and he had to obey her. That was starting to grate on his nerves. He wasn't always wrong. Sure, maybe he wasn't always right, but that didn't mean he was always wrong. Blissfully, that was the last time he talked with his mother until the tournament day. 1 week away from the tournament, and Shinku watched Muramas-san start to work on his jacket. How much do you think you can lift, boy? The man said, a kilo? 5? Would you be able to move comfortably with 8 or 9? Shinku blinked. Yeah, as I thought you have no idea, Muramaze rolled his eyes. Well then, don't just stand there watching. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give your jacket a hard leather interior, and stick in between the pieces an interweave of mail and steel plates. Your chest and shoulders should be able to withstand the blow of a katana, but Kirigaku or shinobi tend to favor thrusting and backstabbing. Murame's sighed. The problem is mobility. It's more of a matter of where the blow will hit rather than how strong it can withstand it. Say I give you a neck guard, suddenly they won't hit the neck any longer, but aim at the throat at the same time, you'll lose visibility, which might be fatal. Shinku crossed his arms over his chest. What about following the design I scrunched up? You mean the plates stitched up to protect the important parts? That would unbalance it, wouldn't it? My suggestion, kid, is to go with a nice long chain mail all through the jacket. It will weigh quite a bit, but it should let you keep your mobility. The plates, I can place them where you are more likely to be hit by enemy shinobi. Heart, kidneys, the spine, I suppose the upper torso is a must. Murame's looked at him. You should try and get some muscles. The more of it you can carry without it weighing down on you, the better. Shinku snorted. As if carrying your scraps around isn't doing wonders. Still, you know the concept behind shinobi armor, right? It's not about making you impenetrable. It's about bludgeoning the attacks. Senbon needles coated with poison will bounce off, and kunao will have their impact deadened by the plates. It's not about getting off unscathed, it's about getting bruises rather than being gutted. I'd like not being gutted, Shinku acquiesced. Murame snorted. Everyone would like that. Very well, leave it to me then, but now I've got to ask you the most important question of them all. Shinku raised an eyebrow. What color do you want it? Shinku Harino watched the crowd in the arena's seats roar and clap at the finalists. The applause rung out particularly loud, especially when the side of the crowd with the pink flags screamed Nariko-tan met the side that yelled Sasuke-sama. He didn't know if his parents had actually come to observe, or if they had chosen to keep on working despite everything. He didn't much care. Standing in line, as the 11th, he gave a sideways glance to his teammates. Nariko gave him a wide grin and a thumb up, while Sasuke smirked. Shinku gripped at the sides of his long sleeves and exhaled. The weight over his shoulders came from the reinforced steel plates that Murama-san converted to shoulder protectors. His jacket now closed with metallic snaps, giving it the appearance of some sort of long dress following the Oriental tradition. He had pockets on the front and the sides, while the reinforced sleeves held protective plates for his arm guard. Unless hit in the face or in the lower part of the body, he was going to bruise, but he wasn't going to bleed. He smiled towards Kabuto too, and then he and the rest took to the genin box while Nariko and Niji remained down below for the first match. Sasuke accosted him a moment later, his lips twitching. Every time we see each other, you increase the amount of armor on you. One day, Shinku mumbled, I'll find a way to wear a samurai's armor. Sasuke shook his head. You ready for this? Shinku exhaled. I hope so, he narrowed his eyes. I don't think I'll go past the first bout, but I'll do my best. If I think I'll have to fight Nariko afterwards, Sasuke shuddered. It's going to be annoying, I know it. Hey, to marry the Sand Kunoichi snapped then, what makes you think you'll defeat Gaara, Sasuke gave a quizzical look to the fangirl, and then muttered. So that's what Nariko meant with, giant fangirl. I couldn't understand why she was laughing like mad. Are you ignoring me? Tamari hissed. You were eavesdropping on us, Sasuke shot back, I find that extremely rude. OHI lazy ass. Ino yelled, coming close to the contestants' box. Remember. You can't surrender. Ino saw Sasuke soon after, and she began to coo. Sasuke-kun. I'll be cheering for you. Down in the arena, Nariko flexed her arms and cracked her neck. So, ready to get that spar underway? Namikaze-san, Niji replied, fate has declared you will win this battle. I will endeavor myself to lose graciously. OHI. That's bullshit. I'm going to kick your ass because I'm strong, got that? Not because fate said so. Niji assumed his own fighting position. There is no fighting against fate, Namikaze-san. Enough talking, Gekko Hayate remarked. Fight. Nariko charged ahead, fist extended. Niji grunted in effort as he deflected the fist, before redirecting the kick up in the air. Even though the gentle fist was all about redirecting the enemy's attacks, Nariko's carried the same strength of a freighter train. If a single one connected, it would shatter bones. Even deflecting them wasn't easy, and for all of his skills Niji found himself being pushed back. He knew this was just another trick of fate, having him fight the Kyuubi Jinhiriki and the daughter of the Yondaime was simply another way for destiny to squash his head on the ground. He knew he wouldn't win the tournament from the very moment he extracted the number 1. He'd surrender soon, letting the girl have the victory fate had decreed for her. "Why aren't you fighting back?" Naruko yelled, "I hate this. I hate this. Why aren't you trying?" Her leg slammed on the ground, sending rock shards everywhere as it cracked the surface. "You won't know until you try, so why are you giving up?" "Because it's fate." Niji spat out, "And fate cannot be defied." "That's bullshit. People defy fate every day." Naruko yelled back, "You Proctor. I would like to surrender." Niji exclaimed then, as Naruko's eyes widened while she stilled. "Very well," Hayate said. "Winner of the watch by means of surrender, Naruko Namikaze." There was a standing ovation from the crowd, as Niji turned and left without saying another word. Naruko's right hand trembled into a fist as she ground her teeth and bit her lower lip. In the end, she'd get a real fight out of Sasuke. "Already my turn," Sasuke grumbled. "See you later, Shinku." "Good luck," Shinku replied. Gaara flickered down in a cloud of sand, soon followed by Sasuke on the other side. Naruko reappeared up in the contestant box, before tackling in a hug Shinku. "Shin-chan. I missed you so much." "So, did you and Fu-chan get to play the dirty doctor and the sick patient?" Who was the patient?" "Come on, tell everything to your best friend." Shinku awkwardly pulled Naruko away, before coughing. Everything's fine." "Oh? No kissing yet? Only platonic? Come on, you have blue balls or something." Shinku spluttered. No, he hadn't missed this side of Naruko at all. "Where is she by the way?" Naruko asked, looking around. "Ah. There she is." Shinku blinked, before following her gaze to a nearby rooftop, where Fu was apparently standing guard over and making gestures towards them. He awkwardly raised a hand back to wave at her. "Smooth, Naruko stated plainly. "They call you Mr. Smoothness now." "What are you talking about?" Shinku replied, perplexedly gazing at Naruko. "Nothing," Naruko rolled her eyes. "Nothing at all?" Down below, meanwhile, the fight began. "Killing you will prove my existence," Gaara said, his eyes dark and wanting for blood. Sasuke sighed, and then shook his head. First off, Sasuke's eyes turned to their main Jakku variant, "I don't want to kill you. Secondly, you'd be dead before you could even manage to land a lethal hit on me because if you haven't realized it yet, we are literally surrounded by Anbu. Third, I already have you in my genjutsu, so unless you want to unleash your Baijiryu in the arena, which I suggest you don't because I'll just smack him down, I highly advise you to surrender." Gaara growled, lifting his hand to call forth his sand, that didn't answer. "You see, we shared an eye glance and that's really all that I need to take control of you. I saw you fight Rock Lee and your sand, no matter how pretty it is, requires chakra for manipulation. You won't be able to manipulate your sand while in my genjutsu, and while apparently your sand shield is still active by reflex, you'll eventually run out of chakra," Sasuke smiled. "So you see, this is my win." "You lie," Gaara hissed. "You lie. You lie. You're lying. You lie, you're lying. I'm not dead." "Course you aren't," Sasuke snorted, "you're still an ally of Konoha. I wouldn't kill you in any circumstance. If I don't kill you, Mother will be displeased, she wants your blood. You're making her angry." Gaara growled. "Enough." Sasuke barked, "There is no mother in here. The only thing you're hearing is probably your Baijiryu. Tsunagakuer has the Ichibai, doesn't it? Is the seal not containing the beast properly? Is that why you're out for blood and—" The illusion broke as the Ichibai's chakra broke free. "I'll kill you!" Gaara roared, half morphed into the Ichibai's state. "Stupid fool," Sasuke snarled, jumping backwards to avoid a crushing hand of sand. The Susanoo rose to its full height, dwarfing the meager form of the half-transformed Gaara before slamming down on its skeletal hand of chakra. "I hope you're still alive after this," Sasuke mumbled, letting the Susanoo go and gazing at the dust cloud. The sign of a hand in the ground were accompanied by the guttural growls from a cracked dome of sand, where within the boy seemed to have survived. Charging ahead, Sasuke extracted his katana and charged it with electrical chakra. His main Jakku active, he sliced through the sand hands and through the sheer friction and heat turned them to glass, shattered glass that left behind floating crystals of light. Why did he get the guy to show off with? Naruko whined, wringing her hands to the metal bar. It's not fair. Temari watched the scene aghast. The Uchiha was toying with Gaara. What sort of monster could he be, if he could literally play with her brother? Slamming the katana through the dome, Sasuke upped the voltage. Gaara screamed from the inside as the sand cracked and split apart. Wind is strong against electricity, but your sand is tied to the earth element. Sasuke remarked coolly, and electricity shatters the ground. Overarching arches of electricity bolted through the entire dome, turning it to glass and then fragments of it. Gaara's eyes were wide open as he found himself facing down the tip of Sasuke's katana. "Do you yield?" Sasuke replied coolly, "Because if you insist, I will stomp you down on the ground again." Gaara knew fear, even though some part of him had forgotten about it. He remembered it, the feeling of being afraid. He stared at the weapon that could kill him, at the boy that could kill him, at the power he had believed so strong suddenly turned out so weak, and he lowered his gaze downwards. "Why aren't you killing me?" he asked warily. "Because you're an ally of Konoha," Sasuke replied. "Because you're a human being. Because you're probably a lonely guy who just needs a friend, rather than a murdering Baijuyu in their heads. Because I don't want to kill you. Because I choose so, because that's who I am. So." Sasuke sheathed his katana, and extended his right hand. "How about it? Do you want to be friends?" Gaara just watched the extended hand, as if it was something so alien and foreign to him that it didn't make sense. Someone extending a hand towards him had never happened before. He took it and muttered, "I yield. Winner by surrender, Sasuke Uchiha." "Hate!" exclaimed. The crowd cheered even louder than before, the flags with the Sasuke-sama flapping hard. Meanwhile Fugaku brought a hand to his face and remained silent. "Dear?" Mikoto asked, "Is everything all right?" "Yes, I'm just trying to ignore my son making friends with someone who wanted to kill him a moment before. I blame the Namikaze's influence on him." Naruko blearily watched the scene from the contestant box, before grumbling. "Wonderful, now I have to make sure he isn't waiting for the right chance to strike him down," she pouted before turning to gaze at Shinku with an appraising glance. "Maybe he'll turn out half as awesome as Shin-chan," she nodded to herself. Shinku's lips twitched in a sort of awkward smile. What?" Temari's hands went towards the scene, then Naruko, then back to the scene, then to the girl's hair. "What happened?" "I think our brother made a friend," Kankuro mumbled. "At least, he hasn't killed him yet." Naruko grumbled from her spot. "Show off of an Uchiha show off," she looked at Shin-chan next. "Now when it's your turn, don't you go out revealing your secret ultra cool techniques, alright? You're both going to make me look bad otherwise." Shinku just chuckled nervously. "Hey," Sasuke appeared in a flicker. "Was I good or what?" Yeah, Yuki-chan," Naruko rolled her eyes. "You were awesome, alright." Kankuro and Shino went down next. "So, we're going to face each other," Sasuke smiled. "You ready to kick the ground, dope?" "OHI team," Naruko retorted. "You're the one going down." "Same rules as sparring." "Same rules as awesome sparring." Sasuke groaned. "I hate awesome sparring rules." "You owe me one." Naruko shot back. "Remember that time with the underwear thief?" "Fine," Sasuke grumbled. "You win." Kabuto smiled from his corner, looking at Shinku who merely shrugged back. He barely understood his teammates half of the time, so he suspected Kabuto was completely lost. The match between Shino and Kankuro ended with Shino's win. Apparently, the Kikaicho could eat the puppeteer's chakra strings, making his puppets unusable. "Good luck, Kabuto-san, Shinku said as Kabuto went down in the arena, keeping up his smile. Shin-chan, you know him? Naruko asked, looking at him. Oh, yeah, Shinku replied. Naruko moved her face closer, her eyes fixated on his. Is something the matter? No, Naruko exclaimed suddenly. Nope, she shook her head. Just my luck. He swore he heard her grumble, more people to check on. Sasuke rolled his eyes and shrugged. Kabuto held his smile even as the proctor gave the signal to start. He charged ahead, his hands going through the seals for the flamethrower technique. The moment the girl opened her fan, it was already too late. The flames engulfed her, forcing her to drop the fan and jump backwards. Two smaller fans emerged from her palms, but she couldn't even swing them. That Kabuto closed the distance even more and began to throw a volley of shuriken to keep her distracted long enough. Within instants, he was holding her at close range and forcing her on the defensive. Sparks sailed in the air as Kunao met fan reinforced with steel for a few minutes, before Kabuto executed a roundhouse kick that settled the match, hitting firmly on the jaw the kunoichi from Suna and sending her to barrel on the ground. The match was Kabuto's victory. Troublesome, Shikamaru mumbled as he descended the arena, followed by Kojuro who remained dutifully quiet. His face was ashen and his hands trembled slightly. A moment of quiet contemplation settled in Shikamaru as he prepared himself for the rat sign. He just had to use his clan's trademark technique, and everything would solve itself. The moment Hayate gave the start signal, Kojuro flickered out of sight. A gust of wind ruffled Shikamaru's hair, and then the boy's throat constricted. A katana stood a mere inch away from his throat, held by a hard-breathing Kojuro. I surrender, Shikamaru drawled out immediately. Shinku blanched. That speed, it was inhuman. How? We're screwed. Naruko chuckled nervously, you can do this, Shin-chan. Very well. Hayate exclaimed. The first rounds of fighting have come to an end. Before the start of the second rounds, we will have the qualifier between Kojuro of Kiri and Harano Shinku. Kojuro remained on the field, while Shinku slowly descended. As he passed by Shikamaru, the Nara whispered. You should surrender too. Shinku just ground his teeth and marched down. Zabuza watched the fight from his spot in the crowd, his arms crossed over his chest and his eyes narrow. He had trained Kojuro exclusively. He had trained the boy for a sole purpose, a sole intention. Either Kojuro killed Harano Shinku, or Harano Shinku killed Kojuro. Furthermore, he had pulled some strings with some friends he still had in Kiri. If Kojuro didn't win, he would never see his parents again. There was no stronger motivation after all, than the risk of losing everything. Fu watched the fight from her spot on the nearby rooftop and pouted. I can't see anything. Unfortunately, Kakashi acquiesced, we are patrolling. I think this is simply your fault, Hayate-san, Yojao replied. Shinku breathed in deeply the air of the arena. The dusty ground felt soft under his feet. He clenched his fists, his eyes locked on those of his opponent. Could he win this? His opponent said, cannot lose. The katana came into sight once more. I will not lose, Shinku could see the boy tighten his hold. So please. The boy pleaded, die. Hayate gave the start. Get down, arms up. Shinku knelt, bringing up both of his arms to protect his face just as the katana's blade came crashing down against it. The brunt of the impact shattered the blade against Shinku's hidden arm guards, but the boy hissed in pain as he found himself tackling from the side Kojuro. Shinku elbowed the Kirigakuer Genin in the stomach, before throwing a left hook at the boy's face. The Kiri Genin lowered his head, avoiding the hook and then palming a kunao with which he stabbed at Shinku's sides where the left kidney was. The plate absorbed the brunt of the impact, surprising the boy as a right fist slammed into Kojuro's side of the face. Shinku charged ahead, palming his own Kirigakuer kunao and thrusting forward. Another kunao met his, of the same quality. Sparks appeared as the two blades connect. A second kunao found its way in Shinku's left hand, but Kojuro instead went for a hand seal to create mist. Shinku flexed his legs, pulling backwards and gripping at the ninja wire in one of his pockets. He quickly tied a knot to the handle of his kunao, before tightening his hold on both. A bottle of water emerged from within the created mist, so that was how the boy had used the technique, and then exploded in midair, enlarging the area until the entire arena was within the fog. Shinku stilled his breathing. He could feel the fog stick to his skin, letting small droplets fall down his chin. I'm sorry, he heard the voice of the boy speak, but if I don't win, they'll kill my parents. Shinku remained silent. Down. He pushed his entire body on the ground within the next second, before spinning his body to the right side. His legs caught those of the Kirigakure shinobi, throwing him on the ground too. In the middle of the fog, Shinku blindly held his grip with his legs on the sides of the boy's stomach before plunging his own kunao deeply into his guts. Gah! Shinku bit down a curse as he felt a kunao plunge through his back, the impact halted by the armor once more. He rolled on the ground, feeling a weight settle over him. He brought his arms up, before feeling the stabbing impact against his guard. Twisting his arms, he flung the enemy's kunao away. He couldn't see more than the boy's blurry form, but it was enough to punch him in the stomach. He was supposed to already be wounded there. With a strong push, Shinku pulled himself free. Swiping away the dribble of blood from his mouth, the boy narrowed his gaze and snarled. Kojuro heard, and thus he charged. Fist met kunao. As the punch connected with Kojuro's face, Shinku's body twisted around the Kirigakure's genin as he delivered a knee attack to the back of Kojuro's left leg. Gripping him with his right arm around his neck, Shinku pulled with his left the boy's hair and threw his body downwards with strength. The boy's mouth opened, as if to scream, but a bullet of highly pressurized water emerged instead, hitting Shinku squarely in the chest and sending him to slam on the ground and roll out of the slowly drying fog. Shinku gripped on the ground, spatting to the side as he stood back up. The attack had nicked him in the chest, and now that he could see it in the light of the day, there were many more nicks and tears all around. The boy had pelted him with shurikens while in the fog and he hadn't even heard him. His armor had saved his life. Shinku breathed deeply, his heart drummed and his ears ringed from the rush of blood. The mist disappeared completely. Behind and below. Shinku twisted his entire body, jumping in midair just as Kojuro came slicing down to cut at his feet. Shinku's right foot slammed into the boy's face, sending him to tumble backwards. Without wasting time, Shinku charged ahead. A knee connected with Kojuro's face once more, holding the boy on the ground as a punch slammed into the boy's sides. Kojuro pushed with all his strength and pulled Shinku away from his body before grabbing at yet one more kunao. Silently, Shinku did the same. He sped up, removing friction from his feet as Kojuro did the same. Was this a spar? No. This was a fight to the death. Shinku's kunao connected with the solid chest of the Kirigakure's boy, who destroyed itself in a clone of water. Before Shinku could react, the shinobi from Kiri struck from the side with a tanto. To the side. Shinku sidestepped, the tanto crashing down on his shoulder pad and shattering there. The steel fragments sliced at his cheek, but he gripped on his enemy's hand, which held the broken blade, and then thrust his own kunao forward. Kojuro yelled in pain as it tore through his left arm, slicing away at the muscle and nicking the bone. Yet the boy tackled Shinku with his shoulders, removing the hold and then kicking the boy in the stomach once more. Why won't you die? Kojuro screamed, letting his left arm bleed as he gripped with his right another kunao. Shinku coughed, holding a bitter smile on his face. Because I'm made of tough stuff, that's why. Shinku clenched his hands against his kunao's handle. Kojuro screamed incoherently as he charged ahead once more, but this time Shinku was ready. Pulling through towards his left side, he sliced forward. A gash opened on Kojuro's left side, as blood sprayed out of it. The boy fell down a moment later, a pool of blood forming at his side. Shinku exhaled, letting go of the breath he had been holding until then. He turned to gaze at the boy, and that was when he blanched. Kojuro stood once more, battered, wounded and bleeding. I'm not giving up, the boy hissed. The Kirigakure genin stumbled forward, before falling face first. Call the match. Shinku exclaimed, he can't clearly continue. Hate gave a firm nod. Medic Nin to the arena. Winner of the match is Shinku Harano, from Konoha. There were a few polite claps. Well, except for the extreme level of cheering he apparently heard from the contestants' box. Woohoo! Shin-chan! Well done! Get your ass to the medics, kid, Hayate said suddenly, or Yojao will kill me. His eyes widened in surprise, before nodding and wobbling his way towards the medic ninjas that were standing slightly hidden in the entrance corridors to the arena. From the rooftops, Kakashi began to sagely nod to himself. I knew he could do it, I knew it. Well done Shinko-kun. Fu yelled, albeit nobody heard her, while Yojao sighed. Why does he always have to get wounded like that? Kakashi chuckled. Boys will be boys. And with that, the first round of the tournament came to an end. Check the description for the links to the author.